Chapter 264. On the battlefield, barbarian warriors rarely ran away unless there was a huge disparity in strength between themselves and the enemy. They would rather die in battle than be seen as cowards. Facing thousands of goblins, the young leader Wharton did not feel a trace of fear. Instead, he stared at the blood-red eyes and laughed maniacally. Ha ha ha! Do you see that? Those bastards are afraid. They don't dare to fight us directly and are trying to use these trashy goblins to exhaust our stamina. How do you think we should respond? Kill all these dwarves, then chop off the heads of the orcs and make them into wine cups. Yes, use their heads as wine cups. The reason why the barbarians were called barbarians was because they still retained many barbaric customs that only primitive societies had. For example, devouring the flesh of their enemies, using their enemies' heads as wine cups, using their enemies' hair to make small objects, and so on. To the human civilization that had officially entered a feudal society, their methods were too cruel and cruel. Thus, they were always excluded from society. In addition, they would immediately draw their swords and kill anyone who offended them. It was no wonder that the nobles in the ruling class hated them. Following the barbarian warriors' shouts, large groups of goblins finally flipped over the large carts. They carried crude weapons and wooden shields and began to attack. Unlike before, they had no room to retreat this time. They could only charge forward with all their might. In the blink of an eye, they had pushed the battle line back by tens of meters. The reinforcements kept up with them. In a short 10 minutes, the entire line of defense looked like it was about to collapse, as if it was about to hold. Look, they can't hold on any longer. General, let's go. Aide-de-camp Imsh excitedly suggested. Lars nodded with a sinister smile. Today, let's put a perfect end to the history of the barbarians in the border forest. Listen to my orders. Attack. Under his orders, all the orcs quickly gathered together and formed several small square formations of 100 men. 4 of them advanced from the middle, while the other 6 split into 2 halves. They went around the obstacles on the left and right, intending to outflank the enemy. There was no doubt that this was a typical 3-pronged attack. It was obvious that he was bullying his opponents because they had fewer people. Although it wasn't a brilliant move, it was the best choice at this time. However, they obviously didn't know that Andre, who was in the forest at the side, was smiling slightly. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Chloe, who had been waiting for a long time, quickly led her subordinates to ignite the kerosene tied to the bull's tail. Then, they quickly retreated to safety. The winter wolf, Michelle, led the pack of wolves and let out a threatening growl. The frenzied bulls adjusted their direction and charged towards the enemy's flank. Although there were only a few hundred of them, the scene was extremely spectacular. Accompanied by a loud rumbling sound, the earth trembled. One had to know that these were all mature bulls. Each of them weighed more than a ton. Furthermore, they had never been castrated before. Their tempers were extremely bad. Coupled with the intense pain from their tails, they charged into the battlefield like heavy tanks. In an instant, they overturned a large number of unprepared orcs. Some of these unlucky orcs were pierced by the daggers tied to the horns of the bulls. Even more were knocked down and trampled by countless hooves. Their entire bodies and armor were flattened. The scene was extremely bloody. The originally neat square formation was on the verge of collapse in the blink of an eye. Lars could only watch helplessly as his subordinates were scattered and scattered. He raised his war hammer and smashed the skull of the bull with a loud bang. He roared furiously, "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Where do these bulls come from? Stop them! Hurry!" and chase them to the side. As soon as he finished speaking, a large number of cavalrymen rushed out of the woods. They did not charge like most cavalrymen on the continent. Instead, they lined up in a straight line, raised the bows in their hands, and began to shoot. Arrows fell from the sky like rain, falling into the square formation that had yet to react. In the blink of an eye, a large number of orcs had fallen. In order to completely stun the enemy in the first round, the commander of the cavalrymen, Buzz, ordered the use of poison arrows. The effect was immediate. All those who were hit by the arrows lost their ability to fight in a short period of time. If they were not rescued in time, death was only a matter of time. Looking at the chaotic battlefield, Andre finally breathed a sigh of relief. He muttered to himself, "Looks like the outcome is set. At least there are no accidents. Next, it's time to reap the fruits of victory." After saying that, he directly cast a flight spell on himself and flew towards the battlefield. He was ready to enjoy the thrill of bombarding the enemy with arcane spells from above. He had just observed that this army did not carry any long-range weapons. At most, they would throw the spears and axes in their hands. As long as they flew high enough, there was no need to worry about being hit at all. As a soul shaman, Tutu Manka had already joined the battle the moment the bulls rushed out. He constantly used nature magic to heal the injured barbarian warriors. At the same time, he used entanglement to make the weeds on the ground grow crazily, fixing the enemy in place and greatly increasing the combat effectiveness of his side. After the wolves had completed their task of driving the bulls away, they also joined the ranks of killing the goblins. It did not take long for thousands of goblins to completely collapse. They turned around and ran towards the rear. They also found that the orcs had no time to care about them, so they chose to escape without hesitation. However, these little monsters obviously did not know that Andre had planned to wipe them out from the beginning. Therefore, the suspension bridge at the rear had been burned down, and there was no way for them to escape. As for the orcs, although they had suffered heavy casualties, they did not show any signs of collapse for the time being. Instead, they raised their shields high and formed a circular formation. Every one of them raised their shields high, blocking the arrows that were shot from afar while cautiously observing the movements outside. It seemed as if they were waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. Looking at the formation on the ground that resembled a tortoise shell, a cold smile appeared on Andre's face. He raised his hand to stop the barbarian warriors from rushing forward to attack. He closed his eyes and began to chant loudly. In just a few seconds, a large amount of fire elemental energy had gathered, slowly forming a small orange-red fireball in his palm. He did not waste any time and gently threw the small fireball in his hand downwards. "Get out of the way! Hurry and disperse. That's a rank 3 arcane spell. Fireball." Lars obviously recognized this spell and desperately tried to push his subordinates aside to escape from the middle. However, it was a pity that the defensive formation was known for being tight to begin with. In addition, his position was close to the center, so even if he pushed and kicked, he could not get far. In the end, he could only lie on the ground and use his shield to cover his head, hoping to reduce the damage caused by the flames and explosions. Chapter 265. Asterisk boom. Asterisk with a deafening explosion. The palm-sized fireball exploded in the middle of the orc's defensive formation. Shockwave. Flames. Shockwave. Everything that was produced in the instant of the explosion was released in the form of energy, directly engulfing an area with a radius of about 10 meters and an area of more than 30 meters. Many unlucky orcs who did not react in time were immediately lifted into the air and then fell headfirst to the ground. Their fragile necks could not withstand the powerful impact, and only a cracking sound could be heard. It was completely broken. The orcs at the center of the explosion were even more miserable. They were all burned beyond recognition, and the metal armor became a natural oven under the heat of the flames, roasting the orcs alive until they were half-cooked. The smell of meat wafted in the air, and screams and wails echoed in the air above the battlefield. Shocking. Whether it was the barbarians who despised magic or the orcs on the periphery, they all felt a chill run down their spines. They did not dare to imagine what would happen if this thing hit them, and their eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. Just a single Tier 3 Arcana technique was enough to completely destroy a formation that would have required the sacrifice of countless people. The strength of a mage was on full display at this moment, especially with the support of the flight technique. Unless a large number of ballistae and ballistae fired in unison, a mage with the ability to fly in the air wouldn't be able to threaten them. Oh my god, this is the sorcery of the Magi? It's too scary. Wharton, who had never seen the might of an arcane spell, felt uncomfortable. In the past, he had only heard stories of magi using sorcery to toy with people's hearts. But after seeing the might of the fireball spell with his own eyes, he instantly felt a sense of defeat. As a warrior, even if he could train his physical strength to the extreme, have steel-like bones, rock-like muscles, and tear a person in half with his bare hands, he would never be able to fly. He would never be able to freely soar in the air like an arcane spell user. This also meant that in a battle between a warrior and a wizard, once a wizard flew into the air, the warrior would immediately fall into a passive situation if he did not have a powerful long-range weapon. He would not even be able to resist. How could a proud barbarian warrior accept this? Tutu Munka lightly patted the young leader's shoulder and sighed. That's right. This was the power of an advanced mage. Open your eyes and watch carefully. See how weak these half-beastmen are in the face of supernatural power. Then carefully consider how you should face that young man in the future. As a soul shaman who lived in a primitive tribe, he had always wanted to change the primitive and ignorant lifestyle of the barbarians. However, under the huge inertia of tradition, all of his efforts had failed. In the end, he had no choice but to disguise himself as a witch doctor. But things were different now. The barbarian tribes in the border forest had suffered a devastating blow and were forced to enter human society in search of a temporary place to live. In addition, the old people who had been maintaining the traditions had died, so it was the best time to guide the Reformation. Wharton nodded subconsciously. You're right. It seems that I have to start using honorifics in the future. Whether these spells are evil or not, his strength is worthy of being our leader. It's a very wise choice, whether it's for revenge or for the survival of the entire race. It seems that you have seen the essence of power clearly, and, at the same time, you know what the tribe really needs. Congratulations, you are now a qualified leader. After saying this, a gratified smile appeared on the old man's face. Just as he was about to continue speaking, Andre, who was flying in the air, cast another rank 4 arcane spell, Igor's Black Tentacles. Black tentacles comparable to giant octopuses emerged from the ground in an instant, and in an instant, the already shaky formation was smashed into pieces. Following this, another rank 4 arcane spell, Ice Storm. Hailstones bigger than an adult's fist fell from the sky, setting off a foul wind and a rain of blood. The half-beastmen who had lost their shields were simply unable to withstand the terrifying impact. Often, a large hole would be smashed into their helmets. There was no need to ask to know that the heads inside must have been split open. The too powerful level 4 spells were the last straw that broke the camel's back. After all, no matter how elite the army was, they were still humans. Even if they were only half-beastmen, they still had feelings and had their own thoughts. Seeing the enemy wreak havoc on their heads, but their generals couldn't do anything about it, they naturally wanted to escape. No one knew who was the first to turn and run. In short, the morale of this elite army of more than 700 men fell to the bottom. They had no desire to fight at all. They threw down the weapons and shields in their hands and began to scatter in all directions. In order to run faster, some of them even took off their heavy armor. Seeing this scene, the cavalry commander, Buzz, immediately pulled out his scimitar and laughed loudly. Brothers, it's time for our master to appreciate how the Brant Wind cavalry pursues the enemy. Then what are we waiting for? Quickly give the order to pursue. I haven't captured a prisoner in a long time. As he spoke, a cavalry soldier pulled out a bundle of rope from his saddle. He wasn't the only one. The others also pulled out ropes at the fastest speed. Their eyes flashed with excitement, and they couldn't wait to rush out and chase after the captives. One had to know that in the distant grassland kingdom of Brant, once one side was defeated, it was time to capture the captives. The speedy cavalry soldiers would use ropes to tie up the enemies one by one and reduce them to slaves. They could either sell them to passing merchants or keep them as coolies for themselves. Without saying a word, Buzz raised his scimitar above his head and waved it forward. Charge! Charge! Ha! Kid, you want to run? Come down. Hee hee. I caught one too. As the cavalry charged into the battlefield, the last bit of resistance was instantly crushed. Regardless of whether it was the barbarians who had gone berserk from killing or the cavalry who were happily capturing captives, both sides were rapidly expanding their battle results. The only difference was that those who were caught by the cavalry were still alive, while the unlucky ones caught by the barbarians were all chopped into minced meat. Even the extremely excited Crowley and the guards beside her had joined the ranks of the pursuers. Little I followed closely behind. As Andre discovered that his familiar could also gain experience points after killing enemies, he sent it out to hunt for experience points. Since Little I could fly, the fleeing enemies couldn't pose much of a threat to it. Chapter 266. On the other side, under the leadership of the wolves, these unlucky bastards had nowhere to hide. Even if they buried themselves in the ground, they would still be dug out. After all, their sense of smell was more sensitive than that of dogs. They could smell prey a few kilometers away, not to mention the pungent goblins and orcs. Standing in the air, allowing the evening breeze to blow his flame-like hair, Andre held the pulley crossbow in his hand and narrowed his eyes to look for the enemy commander. He planned to capture him and bring him back to the castle to see if he could get anything out of him. However, the difficulty of this task was a little high because there were half-orcs fleeing in all directions from the sky. In addition, from a human's point of view, half-orcs basically looked the same and ugly, so it was a little difficult to distinguish them. Just as Andre was at his wit's end, a corpse suddenly flew up from the place where the fireball exploded and flew straight towards him. He didn't dare to delay and hurriedly dodged to the side. He saw two orcs dig themselves out from the pile of corpses and run towards Lincoln City. From their armor, there was no doubt that they were Lars and his adjutant, Imsh. It had to be said that they were indeed worthy of being the commanders of this army. Their intelligence was definitely much higher than their peers who only knew how to obey orders. Otherwise, they wouldn't have thought of such a clever escape plan. First, they used the army as bait and disguised themselves as corpses. They only chose to jump out and run in the opposite direction when the barbarians and cavalry were all chasing after them. If Andre hadn't been hovering in the air, the two of them might have escaped just like that. Interesting. I didn't expect the orcs to be so smart. Didn't the books say that they were generally more stupid? Andre muttered to himself with a playful smile on his face. He was extremely curious now. Who could train the orcs to such an extent? It was incredible. When he was in Lonely Mountain Town, he had seen purebred orcs and knew how low their intelligence was. They were almost like idiots and mentally retarded. Apart from their basic physiological needs, all they did was fight all day long. Half of the Beastmen's bloodline came from the Beastmen, so the average intelligence level could be imagined. Although they inherited some of the intelligence of humans, they had never produced a mage. Almost every race in the Oleo continent could produce mages, and even the goblins and ogres were no exception. However, the orcs and half-orcs were unable to produce mages, which showed just how bad their performance in this area was. But now, there were suddenly two people who were proficient in all kinds of tactics and could even command an army and use formations. It was inevitable that anyone would be curious and want to find out what was going on. As a sorcerer and a transmigrator, Andre had always been curious about this world. Although he had obtained a lot of knowledge from books, he was not satisfied. Instead, he longed to see the real thing. If possible, it would be best to do a few more experiments so that he could better understand and integrate into this magical world. Damn it, the mage is right behind us. He's catching up. Imsh gritted his teeth and cursed as he ran. Idiot, don't look back. Keep running. Flying spells can't last for long. Once the spell's effect wears off, he won't be able to catch up to us. Lars was obviously very knowledgeable about arcane spells. He pointed out the biggest drawback of magic in a single sentence. More than 60% of spells had very short durations. Apart from a few permanent spells that could last for hours, the rest could only last for a few seconds to a few minutes. Moreover, spell slots were also very rare. Otherwise, the entire world would have been completely occupied by arcane magic users. leaving no room for warriors and knights to survive. In fact, his thinking was not wrong. Andre's flying spell could only last for about 8 to 13 minutes. He had already wasted 6 minutes just now. In theory, as long as he could hold on for a few more minutes, he would definitely be able to escape. Unfortunately, he forgot one thing. The speed of flying in the air was always much faster than running on the ground. Even though the two orcs were running with all their might, they still felt a sudden gust of wind above their heads. Following that, they saw a young man in a long robe and holding a crossbow standing in their path. Seeing that there was no way to escape, Imsh did not hesitate. He picked up the flying axe on his belt and threw out fiercely. The blade of the axe, glowing with a cold light, spun in a circle and went straight for Andre's head. When it was less than 20 centimeters away from his skin, two powerful energy fields suddenly appeared and directly ejected the axe from its fixed trajectory, flying close to his cheek. Throughout the whole process, he did not even blink. He appeared to be very calm, because under the double protection of mage armor and protection arrow, unless it was a magical weapon, it was impossible to penetrate 2 layers of magic protection in one go. Since he knew that he could not hurt him, why not pretend to be mysterious? After all, since the day arcane magic was born, countless mages used this method to create a sense of mystery, making most ordinary people feel that magic was omnipotent and powerful to the point that it was not much different from the gods. There was a saying that fear came from the unknown. When people encountered something that they could not understand, their first reaction was often to reject it. However, when this unknown power was too strong to resist, people's attitude would change from rejection to reverence, as if they were facing a god, kneeling on the ground and begging for the other party to not hurt them. To some extent, whether it was a beast or an intelligent life, they all retained the instinct to survive and reproduce. Perhaps at certain times, certain occasions, and certain atmospheres, they could make noble actions such as sacrificing themselves. However, as soon as they calmed down, the instinct to survive would begin to take over their brains again. In order to survive, they would do almost anything. Usually, the smarter a person was, the more they cherished their life. As a cunning beast man, Lars immediately noticed the multicolored arrows at the tip of the crossbow. He stopped in his tracks and raised his shield to block in front of him. His adjutant, Imsh, who was following behind him, found that the flying axe did not have any effect. His expression changed slightly, and he carefully hid his body within the range of his shield. Because of the fireball and ice storm spell just now, he had fully witnessed the terrifying power of arcane magic, so he did not want to be hit by powerful spells at all. Neither of them took the initiative to attack. Instead, they spread out and slowly surrounded each other from both sides. Chapter 267. The corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly as a playful smile flashed across his face. He calmly cast a rank 1 arcane spell, Preemptive Strike, on himself. A dazzling white light flashed past, and his eyes were instantly covered in a layer of faint white fog. He could see through all the flaws in the opponent's movements, even the slightest of movements. Even though this spell was only rank 1, its effects were very powerful. It could allow one to predict the opponent's next move, greatly increasing the accuracy. It was almost certain that the next attack would hit the target. Of course, the arcane spell's effects would disappear after a single attack. Otherwise, it would have to be at least a rank 7 spell. After completing this spell, Andre stared at the 2 half-orc commanders who were on high alert. He deliberately used a very arrogant tone and said, "Now, I'll give you 2 choices. One is to immediately kneel down and become my slave. The other is to be shot by this highly poisonous arrow and die in the most painful way possible. Remember, you only have a minute to consider. If you don't reply in a minute, both of you will die. Mage, you don't know who you've provoked. Let us go immediately, or my master and great chieftain Cass won't let you off." Even though Lars was abnormally afraid of the poisonous arrow, he still tried to threaten him in order to get out of this dangerous situation. He was very clear that if he immediately knelt down and begged for mercy, The vicious and merciless master behind the scenes would quickly make his life worse than death. Thus, he would rather die than surrender. Huh, you think I've started this war without knowing anything about you? Should I say that you're naive and childish, or stupid and ignorant? Do you know? As long as I return to Linen City, it won't be long before your mysterious master meets with me to discuss some very important matters. This world is much more complicated than you think. At the same time, there are many powerful existences that even the gods fear. Your master is no more than a chess piece controlled by others. Ever since Andre heard the name Cass, he instantly recalled the powerful orc warrior who rode the carriage with him. He instantly understood that these monsters in the border forest were also the followers of the Lich Apprentice. Therefore, he purposely said some meaningful words to see the reaction of these two orcs. But it was a pity that they clearly didn't know anything. They appeared to be very surprised, especially Imsh, who seemed to have gone crazy as he muttered to himself, "No, this was impossible. Master promised us. As long as we complete the task, he will allow us to unify the border forest and Chief Keith will become king." Even though these mutterings weren't loud, Andre could still hear them clearly. He immediately shouted, "What mission? Don't tell me they're going to attack Lincoln City." Imsh was startled by the sudden voice and subconsciously nodded. Yes, yes. Master promised us. As long as we assist him in seizing control of that human city, we will be able to obtain. Before he could finish his sentence, Lars, who was standing not far away, threw the war hammer in his hand. At the same time, he cursed, "Idiot! You actually dared to reveal Master's secret to outsiders. Go to hell." Hum. With a low hum, the huge warhammer whizzed past Andre without any collision. But Amash wasn't so lucky. Relying on the huge inertia, the sharp side of the warhammer pierced his brain from his face, sending him flying. A second later, he fell to the ground with his face facing the sky. His head looked like a trampled tomato, and he had completely lost his life. All of this happened too quickly. From the moment the warhammer was thrown to the moment it hit the target, it took at most 3 seconds before a corpse appeared on the ground. Andre couldn't believe it at all. How could these two companions who were so close a few seconds ago suddenly turn hostile? There was no warning at all. Furthermore, they attacked with a one-hit kill without any consideration for each other's feelings. Thinking that the information he was about to obtain had been destroyed, his expression immediately turned ugly. He turned to stare at the orc commander in front of him and threatened in a cold voice, "You better give me an explanation immediately, or I guarantee that you will soon taste intense pain." Explanation? No, mage, I don't need any explanation. Master's orders are absolutely not to be disobeyed. This is the most basic rule, and also a taboo that can never be violated. At this point, Lars glanced at the dead adjutant with a trace of relief in his eyes. Perhaps you know some secrets that we don't, but that doesn't mean that you are stronger than Master. Believe me, when you see him, you will soon understand the meaning of this sentence. As soon as his voice fell, he quickly pulled out a dagger from his waist and stabbed it directly into his chest. Blood instantly gushed out like a fountain. Obviously, his heart was pierced. At the moment of his death, the orc commander raised his arm with difficulty as if he wanted to catch the last rays of the setting sun. His eyes were filled with longing for life as he sighed intermittently. Life is so beautiful, but it's a pity that I'm about to lose it. As the last word was spat out from the mouth with sharp teeth, he fell to the ground with a plop. Dark red blood stained a large area of the grass in just a few seconds. He finally breathed his last. It was hard to imagine that a person who was so infatuated with life would take the initiative to choose death in order to keep a secret. At this moment, Andre finally understood how terrifying the enemy he was about to face was. Especially in the aspect of playing with people's hearts, he was definitely a top master. One had to know that the orcs were not a race known for their loyalty. Not to mention loyalty, they could even tear up a signed contract at any time. They were famous for being fickle. But now, an orc commander actually took the initiative to kill and then commit suicide in order to not reveal any secrets. It could be described as simply unimaginable. Not to mention other aspects, just the method of controlling his subordinates was very superb. Although the truth behind it was very likely that it was threats, deceit, and enticement, it did indeed have a considerable effect. Looking at the two corpses on the ground, Andre sighed slightly and squinted his eyes as he muttered to himself, "Dear opponent, now I'm looking forward to the moment when we meet more and more. I believe that it will be very interesting." After saying that, he squatted down and began to rummage through the corpses to see if he could find anything valuable, such as letters or maps, so that he could have a general understanding of the situation in the forest. Chapter 268. An hour passed quickly, and the moon once again replaced the sun as the ruler of the sky. This hasty battle had finally come to an end. Driven away by the cavalry, a total of 4,000 goblins and 400 prisoners were gathered together. What awaited them was to work in the harsh environment of the mines until they died. They had no rights, no freedom, and no future. As for the rest, they either died at the hands of the enraged barbarian warriors or accidentally fell to their deaths in the mountain streams. At a glance, one could see bloody corpses everywhere. The vultures that smelled the scent of blood circled in the sky. Some of the bolder ones even descended and devoured the flesh and blood of the monsters in large mouthfuls. Andre didn't have the slightest bit of sympathy for these monsters whose hands were stained with the blood of humans, especially the half-orcs who had human skulls hanging on their waists. At one point, he even had the urge to kill all of them. Fortunately, reason prevailed over impulse in the end. Perhaps letting these fellows slowly die in the mines was the best punishment. At the same time, it would bring him a large sum of money. There was no need to be obsessed with a momentary gratification. War was cruel. Although they had made sufficient preparations and firmly grasped the initiative in their hands, there were still casualties. More than 30 barbarians died bravely in battle, and more than 150 were injured. The cavalry fared slightly better, with only a dozen horses killed. A few of them broke their legs, but they would be fine after a few months of rest. Compared to the near-perfect outcome of the battle, these losses were insignificant. Most of the barbarians who died were blinded by hatred and completely disregarded their own injuries. They fought fiercely with the orcs, and in the end, lost too much blood. Now that the battle was over, they collected the skulls of their comrades and enemies. According to tradition, they held a grand cremation ceremony. There was no crying, no grief. Only a primitive and solemn atmosphere spread. Accompanied by ancient and desolate singing and dancing, Wharton carried his father's skull with a heavy expression as he walked to the front of the fire. He didn't care about the damage the flames caused to his skin and directly stuffed the skull into the flames. He then beat his chest and shouted, "Ah!" The other barbarians were not to be outdone, and they all did the same thing. The whole process was filled with an ancient aura. Andre silently watched their actions and shook his head slightly. He handed a rough deerskin map to the old man beside him. "This is what I found on the enemy commander. Help me identify it and see if it's a map of the border forest." Without saying a word, Tutumunka took the map and looked at it carefully. He lowered his voice and replied, "Yes, this is a map of the border forest. Judging from the symbols on it, these guys have already controlled half of the forces living there. I'm afraid you're in trouble." "Trouble?" Andre smiled playfully. "No, it's not a problem. It's just a little more difficult in the game. Although the monster tribes in the wilderness are very destructive, they're as harmless as rabbits compared to the hidden enemy. You have to understand that most of the time, a rampaging bear is far less dangerous than a poisonous snake. So you're leaving?" The old man returned the map and took a deep breath. "Yes, I'm leaving early tomorrow morning. The stage has already been set up in Lincoln City. If I don't appear as one of the main characters, it would be a pity. Besides," at this point, Andre's eyes flashed with a cold light. "Don't you want to know who caused all this?" The more he learned about this powerful Lich's disciple, the more he found that this guy was completely inhumane. He didn't care about the lives of ordinary people. As long as he could achieve his goal, He didn't care about the lives of innocent people. Cruel, cunning, fickle, patient, insightful, and extremely good at controlling people. It could be said that he had the essence of a ruthless person, and he was stirring up the situation of the Green Sea Alliance. It would be a lie to say that Andre wasn't excited about such an opponent. Whether it was in his previous life or this one, he had never been afraid of any challenge. This was because he had always believed in a theory, and that was that intense competition could make people improve, especially the satisfaction that came from defeating one powerful enemy after another. It was like taking drugs that made people unable to stop. Tutu Manka stared at the barbarian warrior who was being cremated and said with gritted teeth, "Of course I want to know. Please find out his identity within 7 months, because I don't have much time left." Not much time left? Andre was shocked. He looked at the old man from head to toe, trying to find signs of death from him. Tutu Manka stroked the sparse beard on his chin, a trace of helplessness appearing on his face. After every soul shaman dies, the power in their body will transform their soul into essence and go to another world. I felt the call of the essence world a few months ago. Normally speaking, I should have left this world long ago, but I used a special method to buy some time for the sake of revenge. Speaking of this, his expression suddenly became ferocious, and his eyes shot out monstrous flames of fury. He growled, "I saw with my own eyes the people of my tribe being slaughtered. Those bastards didn't even let the newborn babies off. No matter who planned all this, he must pay with his life. According to the barbarians' rules, blood must be paid with blood." Looking at the old man's twisted face, Andre couldn't comfort him. He could only nod blankly. "No problem. Why find out who the mastermind is? I'll definitely inform you first. But you'd better be careful. Our enemy isn't simple." In a situation where he couldn't directly tell Tutu Manka the truth, he could only use this method to remind him of the power of the mastermind. Of course, I know how powerful the enemy is. After all, he has integrated more than half of the monsters in the border forest. But don't forget that I'm a soul shaman with many secret techniques. When the time comes, I'll definitely be able to give the enemy a big surprise. As he spoke, the old man gently touched the tattoo on his neck. The unknown monster tattooed on his skin suddenly moved, and a black smoke appeared. In just a second, it returned to its original state. Obviously, this was a magical tattoo. Through some special method, it stored arcane or divine spells on the body, waiting to be activated when needed. Chapter 269. Andre had read in a book that this technique was widely used during the heyday of the ancient magic civilization. However, as time passed, it was eventually buried in the dust of history and completely lost. However, he did not show too much enthusiasm for this special technique because the mages had invented another better method, and that was arcane spell permanence. This new technology allowed one to permanently enchant a person with a known arcane spell and ensure that it would always be effective. It was many times more powerful than the one-time use of magic tattoos. Although the requirements were harsh and it required a large amount of magic power, it was definitely worth it. Of course, the prerequisite for magic permanence was mastering a level 5 arcane spell, which meant that the mage had to be at least level 9. At the same time, the spell permanence was 4 levels lower than the highest spell currently mastered. For example, if a level 9 mage mastered a level 5 arcane spell, he would be able to permanently enchant a level 1 arcane spell. If he was a level 11 mage, he would be able to permanently enchant a level 2 arcane spell, and so on. In short, every mage would choose to permanently enchant themselves with some arcane spells after reaching level 9. Some would choose defensive spells, while others would choose auxiliary spells. These arcane spells were like magic equipment, maintaining the spell effect for 24 hours a day. It could be said that it greatly improved the mage's survival and combat strength. However, the magic tattoo was not without its merits. First of all, this storage was a one-time use. Once it was used up, it had to be recharged, so the requirements were generally very low. Second, it was cheaper. In addition to consuming a lot of magic ink, It only required the maker to be able to cast the arcane spell that had to be stored. The former was like a well-made handmade pocket watch. Although it was very expensive, it was definitely worth the money. The latter was more like an ordinary electronic watch in a shop. Although it was very cheap, it was enough as a timekeeping tool. This was just an example. After all, Orier had not invented mechanical watches yet. At present, most of the timekeeping tools were sundials and hourglasses. Tutumanka noticed the change in Andre's eyes and solemnly promised, "As long as you can find the real culprit, I'm willing to pay any price." The knowledge that you're interested in, the method to become a soul shaman, and of course the tattoo storage technique of the ancient magic civilization. You can take it all away after I'm done with my revenge. Sure. However, you have to promise me one thing. Without my permission, you can't act rashly because it could easily disrupt my plans. Andre directly stated his request. He knew very well that he couldn't stop the old man from taking revenge. However, he had to control this power firmly. Otherwise, it might trigger a series of chain reactions. 6.5 months. I can give you 6.5 months at most. If you can't come up with a plan within this period of time, then I'll have to act in my own way, Tutumanka said firmly. Andre understood that this was the last day of the old man's life, so he didn't try to bargain. Good. It's a deal then. I look forward to hearing good news from you. As a young hand and an old hand clasped tightly together, a faint smile appeared on both Tutumanka and Andre's faces. Both of them understood that this was an alliance. They had the same powerful enemy, so only by working together could they increase their chances of winning. Especially when they didn't know the specific information of the enemy, it was the wisest choice to stick together. There was a saying that the more friends you had, the fewer enemies you had, and at the same time, the more powerful you would be. Fighting alone would never achieve anything great. Knowing how to compromise, how to give in, and how to share benefits was the potential that a successful leader must have. With the addition of a level 8 soul shaman, the power that Andre could mobilize had increased by quite a bit. In addition to the armor, weapons, shields, and belongings that he had taken from the half-beastmen, he was able to recoup the loss of several hundred bulls. One had to know that a standard breastplate in Linton City cost 200 gold coins, a half-body armor cost 600 gold coins, and a full-body armor cost 1,500 gold coins. The orc's equipment just happened to be half-body armor, iron gloves, one-handed axes, tower shields, fully enclosed helmets, leg guards, and boots inlaid with steel plates. A full set of equipment would cost at least 900 gold coins. It was a standard heavy infantry set, and now it was all cheap for him. That was a total of 1,000 sets, and a small number of them were wearing full body armor. Although more than half of them were damaged, they could still be used after being repaired by the blacksmith. Apart from that, the 4,000 goblins and 400 half-orc captives were also a huge amount of wealth. The operators of the mines and iron smelting workshops around the city would be more than happy to divide them up. After all, both half-orcs and goblins were excellent labor forces, and their endurance was much better than human slaves. In a dark and dust-filled environment, humans could only survive for 3 years at most before dying. Goblins and half-beastmen, on the other hand, could survive for more than 5 years. Goblins, in particular, were not picky when it came to food. They would be fine even if they ate rotten food. They had always been the best choice for mine owners, second only to kobolds who were experts at digging holes. In this world where civilian technology was lacking, mining was a high-risk occupation. Collapses were common, and anyone who could fill their stomachs would not choose to be a miner. Therefore, they could only use slaves. No matter how many slaves there were, they could not fill the holes that devoured lives quickly. It was said that some mines had enough bones to pile up into a small mountain. As the saying went, war and plunder were always the best way to obtain wealth. As long as one could win, endless wealth would flow into one's pocket. After this battle, just the spoils of war alone were worth 900,000 to 1 million gold coins. The slaves were also worth a lot. Most importantly, it took less than 3 days to harvest all of this. In terms of efficiency, it was far better than any other business operation. Of course, The price of the weapons and armor was only the selling price. If they were sold to merchants, they would probably only get a quarter or even less. However, Andre planned to keep them to enrich the castle's armory, so he did not need to worry about being cheated by unscrupulous merchants. After a simple sweep of the battlefield, the group returned to the valley. Andre left everything to Abner, the head of internal affairs, while he sorted out a part of the training method for the infantry formation overnight. He directly handed it to Tutu Manka, putting him in charge of training the barbarian warriors according to the content. Chapter 270. In fact, the barbarians didn't need much training in terms of physique and combat skills. The only thing they needed to train was obedience and formation. As long as these two aspects were guaranteed, they would be the best infantry in the south. The night passed quickly as they were busy counting the spoils of war and settling the captives. The next morning, Andre brought Chloe back to Linton City. On the one hand, it was the end of the month, and the city council was about to hold a meeting. As a noble, he had to show his attitude. On the other hand, it was time to meet the old Lich's apprentice and observe her character from a close distance so that he could formulate a targeted strategy. With anticipation for the unknown opponent, he once again passed through the majestic city gates and arrived at the most prosperous city along the southern coast. Andre rubbed his chin and mumbled to himself as he looked at the bustling shops on both sides of the street and the people who were busy making a living. I wonder how long the current situation can last. Perhaps after the trade war starts, half of the city's residents will be struggling in an abyss of suffering. I wonder how many people will starve to death. Andre muttered to himself. Minter, what are you talking about? Beverly blinked innocently and asked. Nothing much, just a little emotional. How is it? Are you ready? Don't embarrass yourself when you get to the Mage Association. Andre smiled as he spoke, gently stroking the girl's little head. According to the rules of the Linton City Mage Association, every time an apprentice grasped a rank 0 arcane spell, they would have to go to the Mage Tower and undergo a test in front of everyone. If they passed, they would receive a series of benefits. Although there was still a gap between them and an official mage, they were still considered a privileged class. They were allowed to wear a silver badge that greatly increased their affinity to magic. However, these were only superficial reasons. His real goal was to raise his status in the Mage Association. After all, it had only been 2 months since the little lowly started learning magic. Just imagine how big of a commotion it would cause if he could train an apprentice who could use a rank 0 spell in just 2 months. After all, there was no way for others to convert a person's various abilities into specific numerical values. Thus, they had no idea how outstanding this adorable blonde girl's intelligence was. They also had no idea how much effort Andre had put into training her. They could only imagine that she was a young mage with a profound background who possessed the secret to rapidly nurturing apprentices. Beverly obviously didn't know what her mentor was planning. She excitedly clenched her little fists and nodded. Don't worry, mentor. I will perform well and let everyone see the results of your teaching. Little thing, don't cry when you make a mistake. Chloe teased the little girl as she pinched her cheeks. The little girl raised her chin with disdain and curled her lips. Humph. You're jealous. I'm instructor's only apprentice, and I even grasped a tier 0 arcana technique before you. How could I possibly make a mistake at such a critical moment? Oh, you still owe me a silver coin of the day. She of the girl of the mage, of the day of her of the mage. Beveroff the of the mage, Beverly of the of the what a little money grubber. If you agree to bet, you must accept your loss. Here's 1 silver coin. Chloe took out a silver coin from her delicate purse and placed it in the girl's hand. She then took the opportunity to pinch her cheeks, which had a little baby fat. Minter, she's always bullying me. After receiving the silver coins, Beverly rubbed her blushing face and immediately stood up. Although she was a mage apprentice who had grasped a rank 0 arcane spell, she was still far from being a match for Chloe. Thus, she would always be at a disadvantage whenever they fought. Over time, she learned to snitch on others. Ha ha ha, little thing, your mentor is my fiancé. How could he help you? My money isn't that easy to take. Be prepared to receive your report. Chloe of the mage, 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 of the mage. No. Ha ha. Quick. Stop. Ha ha. Stop. I can't take it anymore. Minter, come and save me. Beverly, who was being attacked, struggled with all her might as she begged for help. Her body kept twisting, and her whole body kept trembling. As a little girl who was not even 10 years old, she was at the age where she was most afraid of being tickled. Thus, within a few minutes, the two girls, one big and one small, rolled around on the seats of the carriage, attacking each other's sensitive parts. It was obvious that this was not the first time they had fought like this. Thus, Andre was very calm. He sat silently on the seat and enjoyed the beautiful scenery with a smile on his face. From time to time, he would hold them up to prevent them from accidentally rolling on the ground. After letting them play for a while, Andre reminded them playfully, "Ladies, we'll reach the entrance of the Mage Tower in a few minutes. If you don't want to be seen in disheveled clothes, you'd better get up quickly and tidy yourself up. Otherwise," before he could finish his words, the two girls instantly separated and quickly tidied up their clothes, hair, and boots. After that, they steadied their breathing. Before the carriage stopped, they finally regained the image of a reserved lady. Secretly sighing at the fickleness of women, Andre pushed open the carriage door and said to the coachman, "Wait here. I'll probably come out in an hour." "Understood. I'll wait here for you and miss to come back." The coachman hurriedly bowed and replied without hesitation, "You two come with me. Remember not to touch anything, especially you, Chloe. Keep your curiosity to yourself." Andre warned the girls very seriously. He did not want to see two mischievous girls making a scene in the Mage Tower. "I swear I won't touch anything. I'll just follow behind you obediently." Chloe raised her right hand that was wearing a white lace glove and swore, "I hope so." After saying this, Andre turned around and took the lead to pass through the illusion set up around the Mage Tower. He walked into the garden outside. He knew that this constant magic could isolate ordinary people who did not have the ability to cast spells. Only those who were true arcane users could pass through. After a mere second, Beverly passed through the illusion. Because she had mastered rank 0 arcane spells, she no longer needed anyone to lead her and could walk in by herself. Chloe followed closely behind. As she walked, she exclaimed in a small voice, "Wow, this is the Mage Garden? It's amazing. Look, that flower is so big, and it has sharp teeth." Chapter 271. The little lowly glanced at her and pretended to be disdainful. "You're making a fuss over nothing. That's just a man-eating flower. You'll faint when you see the magic statue in the basement of the tower." "Damn it. Stop pretending to be an adult. I don't believe that you didn't scream when you saw it for the first time." Chloe retorted, unconvinced. Seeing that the two were about to start bickering again, Andre shook his head helplessly and turned around to scold them in a low voice. "Shut up. Keep quiet. Otherwise, don't even think about learning any magic from me. I promise I won't say a word from now on. I promise to." Perhaps the threat worked. The two Lolas, one big and one small, glared at each other fiercely and covered their mouths immediately. Andre didn't know whether to laugh or cry at their expressions. He gently rubbed his forehead and walked towards the animated statue at the entrance. Passing through the quiet corridor, Andre saw that the hall was filled with official mages wearing badges. There were more than 40 of them, probably all the mages in Lincoln City. They all had nervous expressions and lowered their heads as they whispered to each other, as if waiting for someone to arrive. Just as Andre was wondering why all these people were in the hall, the door to the first room on the left was suddenly pushed open, and a white-haired, muscular old man walked out. Obviously, there was no one else who could walk out of that room other than the chairman. Boris, with his eagle-like eyes, scanned everyone's faces and slowly walked to the center of the hall. He waved his hand without looking back and said to Andre, "You've come back just in time. Quickly find a seat over there. I have something important to announce." "As you wish, master." Andre bowed slightly and brought the two little tails behind him to sit down at the empty table on the far right. He knew that now wasn't the time to ask questions, so he sat down obediently to see what was going on that caused such a commotion. Boris didn't let the people wait too long. He cleared his throat and said loudly, "Everyone, perhaps all of you are wondering why I've gathered everyone here. The reason was simple. The Lincoln City Council was about to convene again to vote on whether to start another trade war with Bacaro City. I'm sure some of you still remember how much damage the Sorcerer Association suffered in the last trade war. That's why we have to stop the situation from escalating. Mr. President, are you saying that all the magicians with titles should vote against the plan?" Gavin Lauren asked with a frown. Boris nodded without hesitation. "That's right. Including me, there are a total of 15 voting members in the Mage Association. That's about 1/10 of the total number of members in the Mage Association. At the same time, I've also contacted some nobles who have close ties with the Mage Association. As for who they are, I won't reveal too much. You just have to remember one thing, and that is to protect the interests of all the magicians. Starting a war means that everyone will be assigned to warships, and they could be buried at sea at any time." Gavin Lauren obviously didn't agree with this statement. He immediately stood up to refute. "Mr. President, please forgive my bluntness. I'm afraid that there's no other way to solve the current situation in Lincoln City other than war. Since last month, our merchant ships have been attacked by pirates and Bacaro City's warships. Our trade has been shrinking. If we don't show them what we're made of, how can we protect everyone's interests?" His words resonated with some of the magicians who were involved in maritime trade. Many of them began to whisper among themselves, thinking that they should support starting a war. Hearing the buzzing sounds coming from below the stage, Boris hurriedly slammed the table hard. "Quiet. Everyone quiet down. The problem this time is much more serious than you think. It's not just a matter of trade. Someone is trying to overthrow the rule of this city. War and chaos are what this guy wants to see the most, and we have to stop this from happening." Most humans were usually very selfish and short-sighted. Once their interests were threatened, they would immediately take action. Even the most intelligent magicians were no exception. Even though the president had already revealed the truth of the matter, nearly a third of the magicians still chose not to vote against it. This was because the shrinking trade was costing them a lot of money. The remaining half of the magicians were also taking a wait-and-see attitude. In the end, the remaining half were the ones who supported starting a war. Just as the crowd began to stir, the old man who had a direct confrontation with Gavin Lauren suddenly stood up and shouted loudly, "Mr. President, I think that Gavin Lauren is trying to split the Magicians Association. He should be killed immediately." As soon as these words were spoken, the originally chaotic hall instantly quieted down. Gavin Lauren's face was extremely gloomy, and the anger in his eyes was almost tangible. He resisted the urge to go on a rampage and replied with a vicious voice, "Old dog, just you wait. I'll remember what you said today. I swear, it won't be long before not only you die, but your family and descendants will also die." "Oomph. Just you? A hot-tempered and impulsive idiot? If it wasn't for the president, you would have become a corpse half a year ago. Kid, remember this. When you're not strong enough, it's best to shut your stinky mouth. It can't give you any power, and it can't threaten those who are stronger than you. Don't think that you're invincible just because you won the magic duel at the airport. Compared to a real high-grade magician, you're still far from being invincible." The old man was not frightened by the words just now. Instead, he revealed a naked contempt, completely using a condescending attitude to ridicule his opponent. Seeing that the two factions of the Magicians Association were about to start a tit-for-tat again, Boris slammed his fist on the table and roared angrily, "Enough! All of you shut up. I've said it before, no fighting is allowed in the Magician Tower. I'm sorry, Mr. President, but as you can see, Gavin Lauren is like a mad dog, constantly thinking about fighting and killing. This is not in line with the purpose of the Magicians Association. I solemnly remind you, if this continues, our association will completely become a tool of war and not an independent Magicians Association with the main purpose of development and research." After saying this, the old man raised his head and looked at the president without backing down, his dark green eyes flashing with wisdom. Chapter 272. At the same time, a third of the people who had been observing the situation stood up to express their stance. The Association of Mages was split into three distinct groups. The first group was the young radicals with Gavinlarn at the core. Most of these mages were not over 50 years old, and they advocated using force to solve all problems. At the same time, they longed for more power. The second group was the conservatives with the old mages at the core. They were more willing to follow ancient traditions and quietly stay at home to research arcane magic. They hated being disturbed by trivial matters and hated the radicals. The last group was the neutral group. They completely followed the leader's lead and did not have many opinions. As long as they could ensure their daily lives and research, they would not cause trouble. There was no doubt that the conflicts that had been brewing in the association for a long time finally erupted at this moment. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became extremely solemn. The huge pressure caused a few more wrinkles to appear on Boris's face in just a few seconds. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes passed, 10 minutes passed. As time passed, every mage's forehead began to sweat uncontrollably. They understood that the leader's choice would determine the future of the organization. It was closely related to their own interests, because one of the two opposing factions was likely to be wiped out. After all, this kind of thing had happened before in the history of Linden City. Although mages were rare and precious, in order to maintain the better development of the entire organization, they sometimes had to bear the pain and get rid of some of them. The mages on the Sardinia Islands were the escapees of the Great Purge back then. Just as everyone was waiting for Boris to make his choice, Andrei suddenly stood up and bowed slightly to everyone. "Everyone, Sir President, before you make your choice, I have important news. I originally planned to wait until the end of the meeting, but now it seems that it's better to say it in advance. The monsters in the border forest have been united by an unknown force. They wiped out many barbarian tribes not long ago, and even invaded my territory in the Tuays Valley 2 days ago. In addition, the monster army this time is different from the previous ones. Not only do they have terrifying numbers, but they are also well-equipped. I saw the orcs form a phalanx when they attacked. This is a helmet pulled off from their body. I believe you should be able to recognize its origin." As he spoke, Andrei threw a helmet that was stained with blood and constantly emitting a foul stench onto the ground. Anyone who wasn't an idiot would know that only a helmet worn by a beastman or a beastman would have such a foul stench. Originally, he planned to use it as a trump card during the meeting of the nobles to let all the nobles know how bad the environment around them was. He wanted to prevent the outbreak of trade wars as much as possible. If he could not prevent the outbreak of war, then he would try to gain as much power and profit as possible. However, he had to use it in advance when he saw that the association was about to erupt into internal strife. After all, to a certain extent, the power that he could rely on was too little. At this time, the Sorcerer Association could not afford to have any problems. The news of the destruction of the barbarian tribe was like a heavy bomb, causing an intense reaction. What? How is this possible? Damn it, it's only been 10 years. How did they recover so quickly? Is there going to be another barbarian invasion of civilization? Arcane above. That's the standard equipment of Lincoln City. Someone must be secretly smuggling weapons and armor. Seeing that the topic had been changed, Andrei's lips curled up slightly. He did not continue to interfere. He returned to his seat and silently observed everyone's every move. There was a saying that when the internal conflict was so intense that it could not be resolved, it would be shifted to other places through war. He was now using the monsters in the border forest to change the topic. After all, in the eyes of most people, no matter how intense the conflict between them was, they had to unite in the face of the invasion of the barbarian monsters. This was a point that almost all intelligent races agreed upon. It had to be said that Andrei's move was played very well. In an instant, the crisis of the Mage Association was resolved. Boris immediately followed suit and changed the topic from the internal conflict to the monsters in the border forest. In the end, he successfully won the support of more than 70% of the members. They decided to collectively vote against the plan in the upcoming city council meeting. As for Gavin Lauren, who wanted to start a war, his face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. His eyes were constantly emitting a cold light. However, under the suppression of absolute power, he did not dare to act rashly, especially when President Boris's terrifying spellcasting ability was definitely not something he could deal with. Andre remembered that in his previous life, he had read a very thought-provoking book called The Study of Benefits. This book described the nature of the entire world from various aspects. It could be said that from small individuals and groups to large countries and societies, from the ancient tribes to the increasingly perfect feudal system in Orire, almost everything revolved around one word: benefits. Without the competition for benefits, there would be no development of productivity, and there would be no progress in society. There would also be no so-called social class. It was like a catalyst for all things. Through countless evolutions, history would continue to move forward until the day the world was destroyed. Although the mages were obsessed with studying the mysteries of magic, they were still humans. They also had their own interests to pursue. The monsters in the border forest had once again gathered, which meant that they were a threat to the safety of Lincoln City. It was equivalent to violating the basic interests of every member of the association. After all, these beastly creatures were known for their destructive nature. Wherever they went, they would either loot or set fire to it. They did not know how to rule at all. In fact, most of the mages did not mind the change of ruler of the city. Similarly, they did not mind the deaths of many civilians. What they cared about was whether their social status would drop and whether the new ruler would be able to provide sufficient material support like before. As long as these 2 points were met, even a lowly goblin would not have a problem becoming the duke. However, it was a pity that the monsters' barbaric destruction of civilization time and time again proved that they were not qualified to be rulers. Moreover, they were full of disdain for the profound art of arcane magic. They were more willing to believe in muscles and sharp blades. There was no way they would become partners with the Association of Mages. Therefore, when the mages heard the bad news brought by Andre, they put aside their differences and temporarily joined forces to prepare for the impending crisis. The conflict between factions was temporarily diverted. Chapter 273. President Boris also took the opportunity to show his strong side, forcefully suppressing the 2 factions that were at odds with each other. Gavin Lauren, who wanted to use this as a pretext to make a fuss, could only pinch his nose and admit defeat. He even shook hands with his sworn enemy in front of everyone and pretended to say a few words of courtesy. Although it seemed harmonious on the surface, Andre, who was sitting on a chair and watching coldly from the sidelines, knew very well that a rift had formed within the Mage Association. Unless one side fell, the conflict would never disappear. Of course, these conflicts had little to do with him. After all he wanted to do was to take advantage of the situation and completely win the game in a year's time. It didn't matter what the Mage Association became, because once he defeated his opponent, he would become the behind-the-scenes ruler of this city and no longer needed the protection of any forces. "Dear, what are you thinking about?" Chloe, who had been watching the show for a long time, asked curiously. "Nothing. I'm just lamenting. I've only been in Linton City for less than 2 months, and I've already been involved in so many sudden incidents. It's really unbelievable to think about it." Andre replied, rather emotionally. Indeed, ever since he came to this port city in the south, he had been in constant trouble. First, he discovered a huge secret during a mission. Then he was besieged by barbarians. The last time he followed the people of the Church of the Goddess of Dawn to explore the ruins, he was extremely unlucky. Not only did he encounter a terrifying legendary lich, but he was also forced to play a dangerous game. However, he also understood that a city's resources were limited. If he wanted to stand out in this city, he would inevitably harm the interests of others, and harm the interests of others would definitely bring about trouble. After all, there was a saying that cutting off one's path to wealth was like killing one's parents. Since he was snatching benefits from others, he had to be prepared for revenge. Unless Andre was willing to be a nameless good guy and endure all kinds of people trying to make things difficult for him, it was only a matter of time before trouble came knocking on his door. Obviously, whether it was as a transmigrator or as a social elite in his previous life, he could not get used to kneeling to the nobles all day long. Similarly, he could not tolerate being at the bottom of the social ladder. As the saying goes, people strive for greater heights while water flows downward. They seek more wealth, power, authority, and a better life. It could be said that as long as a person was alive, their desires would never be fulfilled. After figuring this out, Andre laughed self-deprecatingly. His orange-red eyes were burning like flames, looking exceptionally enchanting. Andre, how did your eyes and hair become like this? Did something happen to you when you were outside the city for more than a month? Boris asked with a frown as he appeared beside the table. Yes, master. A lot of things happened, especially in the last half a month. It was extremely exciting. As for my hair and eyes, they're the result of the awakening of my fire elemental bloodline. I'm also worried about how to cover them up. You have to know that my current appearance is too conspicuous in front of ordinary people, Andre explained with a helpless expression. Although the fire elemental bloodline was one of the relatively harmless bloodlines in the other world, the commoners did not know about it. They would only worry about whether you would suddenly go crazy and start a massacre. Fire elemental bloodline? Boris was slightly taken aback. He stretched out his hand to stroke his fiery red hair. He could not help but sigh. What a rich fire elemental. It's a pity. If you weren't a mage, you could have become an outstanding warlock or warrior. Warlock. A trace of doubt appeared on Andre's face. He had seen people mentioning this profession many times in books, but the descriptions were very vague. Some people believed that it was the bloodline of some powerful creatures that created these special arcane users. Some people believed that a small number of people accidentally activated the ubiquitous magic energy when they were born and formed a node in their body, which eventually led to the birth of warlocks. But both of these theories had their own reasons. The first theory was based on those mixed-blood people who mingled in human society. Whether it was the descendants of dragons, demons, devils, heavenly creatures, elementals, etc., all of them had innate spells, and their affinity for magic was far superior to that of humans. The second theory was that there were many warlocks who did not have any other bloodline, so there were many different theories. No one could tell which was true and which was false. Seeing the confusion in Andre's eyes, President Boris smiled and explained, "That's right, warlocks. This is a very interesting profession. They rely on the power that flows in their bloodline to cast spells. Although the number of arcane spells they grasp is very small, they can use them a lot. To give a simple example, a level 2 mage usually only has 2 level 1 spell slots. This means that they can only release 2 level 1 arcane spells a day, but can learn more than 10 spells. As for warlocks, they're the exact opposite. They can release 4 level 1 arcane spells a day when they are level 2, but the number of spells they grasp is not even a fifth of that of a mage. Most importantly, they grasp arcane spells by feeling. Learning them is of no use to them. Based on the density of fire elemental energy around your body, if you're not already a mage, you will have a certain chance of becoming a warlock the moment your bloodline awakens." After the president's explanation, Andre quickly understood what a warlock was. He muttered to himself, "So it's a group of arcane spell users who are severely biased in one area." Severely biased in one area? That's the most appropriate description for a warlock. A special bloodline is a good thing. I reckon that once this news spreads, you will immediately be in luck. As he spoke, a playful smile appeared on Boris's aged face. "Why do you say that?" Andre did not understand the president's meaning at all and blinked innocently. Boris laughed and explained, "It's very simple, child. You're the only person in the entire Lincoln City with a special bloodline. Think about it. What will those nobles do when they hear this news? Oh, my goodness. Those fellows will definitely send all the women in their families to have a child with you. I heard that the famous dragon, Knight, died of exhaustion on the bellies of noble ladies. Chloe's voice trembled as she spoke the terrifying truth. Chapter 274. Special bloodlines were something that every noble family yearned to obtain. Those who had already obtained special bloodlines would even marry close relatives in order to ensure that their bloodline could continue. Moreover, they were all siblings. However, everyone knew that the bloodline of powerful creatures would slowly become thinner and thinner with the passage of time. Inbreeding could only slow down this process, but it could not completely eliminate it. That was why, even though the Dragon Knight had worked so hard to create thousands of descendants, not a single one of them was left behind. Andre could already imagine how terrifying the consequences would be if the news of him being a descendant of the fire elementals were to spread. Just the thought of those noble women whizzing towards him and the terrible fate of being reduced to a cedar sent chills down his spine. He hurriedly asked the president for help with a bitter smile. "Master, no matter what, you have to help me this time. As long as you can cover these characteristics of my body, I am willing to offer 2 level 4 arcane spells to the association. One is Ice Storm, and the other is Black Tentacles of Igor." In order to ensure that he would not end up as miserable as the Dragon Knight, Andre did not care about anything else. He directly took out the 2 level 4 arcane spells that the Mage Association did not have. With the decline of the magic civilization, many powerful arcane spells had been lost. Even the Mage Association did not preserve many of them, especially arcane spells of level 3 and above. It would be good if they could preserve about 10 of them, and every one of them was exceptionally precious. Taking out 2 of them at once was definitely generous. Even experienced and knowledgeable great mage like Boris could not help but feel his breathing quicken. As for the other members who had not left after the meeting, their eyes glowed with greed. They stared fixedly at Andre as if they wanted to eat him alive. For a moment, there was no other sound in the hall apart from heavy breathing. Killing intent. The entire first floor of the Mage Tower was filled with a terrifying killing intent. Andre did not doubt that if the president was not here, these crazy mages in front of him would definitely rush up and strip him naked, then find the arcane spell scrolls that they desperately wanted. Too terrifying. No wonder people said that mages were the most terrifying profession in the world. No wonder Eunice was so scared when she heard about the Mage Association. The unbearable fanatical atmosphere lasted for a full 5 minutes. In the end, Boris was the first to recover. He took a deep breath and ordered with a slightly trembling voice, "Take it out. Take it out now. I need to see these 2 scrolls immediately. If they really are rank 4 arcana spells, I'll immediately promote you to a senior member. At the same time, I guarantee that I'll take care of your hair and eyes." "As you wish, master." Andre did not hesitate. He quickly took out 2 parchments from his waist pouch and placed them in the president's hands. In fact, he didn't know how big of a misunderstanding his actions had caused, nor did he know what kind of terrifying effects this misunderstanding would have. After all, in the eyes of most wizards, rank 4 arcane spells were something that only great wizards or magic families could possess. Moreover, the fact that he could take out 2 of them without even blinking was proof of his strength. Coupled with the fact that he had become an official wizard at the age of 14, it was enough to make countless people think of him. Obviously, everyone present agreed that Andre was definitely the successor of a magic family or the beloved disciple of a great wizard. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to have obtained rank 4 magic scrolls. Very quickly, their gazes became incomparably hot. They secretly decided that they had to establish a good relationship with him. Who knows, they might be able to obtain some lost magical knowledge. Boris did not pay attention to the commotion in the hall. He focused on studying the 2 arcane spells on the scrolls. He was completely immersed in the mysterious symbols and patterns, appearing as if he was intoxicated. After all, he hadn't seen a new spell for 20 years. Today, he actually saw 2 at once. It was inevitable that he would be somewhat excited. However, it was a pity that Aegon's black tentacles belonged to the incantation department, while Hailstorm belonged to the evocation department. They belonged to the opposite faction of the transmutation department. Thus, after studying for a long time, a bitter smile appeared on the president's face. He muttered to himself, "Damn it, I can clearly see two powerful arcane spells, but I can't learn them. This is simply too unbearable. Old friend, why don't you let me try?" An old wizard with a white beard hurried forward to recommend himself. Boris glanced at the other party and rejected without hesitation. "No way. According to the rules of the association, even if you are a senior member, you can only obtain rank 4 arcane spell scrolls after making enough contributions. Don't even think about taking advantage of me." The old wizard laughed dryly and rubbed his nose. He carefully took out a notebook from his robes. "My friend, if no one tries to make a copy, how can we determine the effects of these two arcane spells? How about this? I have an improved version of the magic statue creation technique here. I can give it to Wizard Andre as compensation. You can treat it as a private transaction between the two of us. After you learn these two spells, I will definitely make a copy and send it to the association. What do you think? Barca, don't think that you can take advantage of me just because you're a senior member." Everyone present knew the difference in value between two fourth-tier arcana techniques and a single magic statue creation manual. Show some sincerity, or don't even think about getting past me. As he spoke, Boris quickly rolled up the two pieces of parchment, deliberately putting on an angry expression. In fact, most of the members present knew that this old man named Barca was an extremely rare rank 11 wizard in the association. He had always been on good terms with the chairman and was also an important elder. The two of them are most likely joking around again. Perhaps in normal times, everyone would stand to the side and watch the two of them tease each other with a smile on their faces. However, this time, two rank 4 arcane spell scrolls were involved. Who knew if this shameless old man would make a copy and send it to the association after learning the scrolls? It would be troublesome if he took them for himself. "Sir Chairman, I have the heart of a 1,000-year-old red ironwood. It is definitely an excellent material for making magic staffs and staffs. If I take it to the auction house, the starting price will be at least 50,000 gold coins. I am willing to use it to exchange for priority copying rights. In addition, I swear in the name of magic that I will make 2 new scrolls and send them to you within 3 days." Another senior member finally couldn't help but jump out, not showing any signs of weakness as he began to raise the price. His eyes couldn't help but reveal excitement and greed, and his wrinkled old face was flushed with excitement. It was as if he had suddenly become a few years younger. He didn't hide his desire for the new arcane spell at all. Chapter 275. Bastard. "Drew, how dare you snatch my stuff?" Barsad turned around and glared at him, his white beard curling up in anger. However, the old wizard called Drew was not afraid of his threat. He chuckled and said proudly, "This is not called snatching. This is called fair competition. There is no one in the association who is more authoritative than me in arcane identification." "Bullshit. How dare you call yourself an authoritative figure? I am the authoritative figure in arcane magic. Also, I have a rare gem, the Emperor's Tear." Barsad took out a crystal clear gem from his pocket, its center emitting a milky white halo. It looked as big as a thumbnail and was in the shape of a teardrop. It was obviously priceless. Hiss, after seeing this rare treasure, everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. Even Boris was a little moved. The Emperor's Tear was also known as the Emperor's Tear, Frozen Tear, or Lich's Tear. Its texture was harder than diamonds, and it could even directly store arcane spells above level 6. It was one of the top materials for making magical items. It had always been priceless and extremely rare. Usually, only 1 or 2 could be mined from mine. Every time it appeared, it would cause countless people to fight over it. "Oh, heavens, you old lunatic." He actually took out his trump card. Drew was dumbfounded as he muttered to himself, "Oomph. As a pure wizard, I am willing to pay any price in exchange for knowledge. To me, knowledge is the most precious wealth. The rest of the money and treasures are just tools necessary for the pursuit of knowledge. If you value them too much, you will lose the path to a higher level. Just like what is said in the beginner's textbook for wizards, only knowledge and truth will last forever. After saying this, Barsad violently snatched the 2 scrolls from the president's hands. He then stuffed the gem and the notebook into Andre's hands and ran excitedly to the room on the 2nd floor of the tower to learn the ice storm and Igor's black tentacles that were recorded on it. Seeing the old wizard disappear around the corner of the stairs, Drew shook his head gently and sighed. He is still the same as before, always full of passion for magic. Even after so many years, he hasn't changed at all. Forget it, I'll just wait patiently for a few days. Ha, pure mage. Boris came back to his senses and shook his head with a bitter smile, his eyes showing a hint of vicissitudes. However, he did not feel melancholy for too long. He quickly returned to normal and teased. Child, you've made a fortune this time. The value of an emperor's tear is immeasurable, especially for a mage. Even if Andre had never heard of the king's tear before, he could still easily tell that this gem was different from the rest when he felt the intense magical waves coming from the gem in his hand. His face revealed an unconcealable surprise. It's really amazing. It can actually directly absorb the magical energy that is everywhere and transform it into other forms. Boris explained with a smile, of course, many high-grade magical equipment must be enchanted with the king's tear. You'll understand its wonderful use when your mage level is higher. Also, no matter what, you've contributed 2 level 4 arcane spells to the association. Therefore, I now announce that you're promoted to a senior member. Here, this is your new badge. You can enter and leave any place except the control room with it. At the same time, level 3 and above spells will also be open to the association. After saying that, he took out a magical badge with 6 pearls surrounding a ruby from his pocket. Andre did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly put the badge in his hand into his waist bag, took off the ordinary member badge on his chest, and put on the new badge. The moment he put on, he immediately felt a strong power attached to it. Not only did he have an additional level 3 and level 4 arcane spell slot, but he also had a permanent voice spell. In battle, even if he was hit by the enemy's silence spell, he would not have to worry about not being able to chant spells. He had to admit that the Association of Mages was really generous to its senior members. Perhaps the cost of making the badge alone was as high as tens of thousands of gold coins. In addition to the sharing of arcane and magical knowledge, it was no wonder that there were very few cases of betrayal in the association after so many years of development. Perhaps in the eyes of most mages, this was the paradise of their dreams. Of course, there were not many senior members. Including the president, there were only less than 6. Otherwise, the Association of Mages would have gone bankrupt long ago. As the saying goes, people are in high spirits when they're in a good mood. Andre, who had gained so many benefits, was in high spirits. Just as he was about to bow to express his gratitude, the little lowly Beverly suddenly stood up and asked carefully, Minter, when can I start the apprentice test? Oh, damn it. I almost forgot about this matter. Andre lightly patted his head and immediately bowed slightly to all the members of the association present. Everyone, Mr. President, the main purpose of my visit today is to give my apprentice, which is the girl beside me, to take the apprentice test. After more than a month of learning, she has already learned and mastered rank 0 arcane spells. It just so happens that there are so many people here today who could be witnesses. I reckon that it won't be long before we have a new member. After he finished speaking, he gently pushed the little girl forward, revealing Beverly in front of everyone. For a moment, the mages, who had always been known for their calmness and wisdom, were all dumbfounded. A small number of them even pinched their own thighs hard, not daring to believe that this was real. Oh my God, is this a prank, or is there something wrong with my ears? A mage, who looked to be in his early 30s, muttered to himself in a low voice. His 2 eyes were wide open, as if he wanted to take a closer look at the extremely nervous girl. In fact, it wasn't just him. Most of the mages present were extremely shocked, and a small number of them felt that it was impossible. Was this a joke? A mage apprentice, from knowing nothing to mastering the first arcane spell, usually needed at least 8 months to 2 years of learning. The curriculum included meditation, arcane theory, incantation voice practice, finger dexterity practice, arcane geometry, arcane mathematics, introduction to space and planes, and so on. Although before this, the apprentices in the Mage Tower had already mastered the reading and writing of the common language, the basics of mathematics, and the identification of raw materials, but it was still impossible to cultivate a real mage apprentice in just a month. Chapter 276. Seeing that everyone was looking at her with strange and scrutinizing eyes, Beverly felt a little scared. She subconsciously pulled her teacher's robe. She had stayed in this tower for a long time and heard a lot of scary legends about the official mages, so she was very nervous. She gently bit her lower lip and trembled. Andre felt the little girl's uneasiness. He smiled and stroked her long golden hair. He raised his head and said to the president, "Master, there is a good saying. Facts speak louder than words. As long as I let my apprentice cast a level 0 arcane spell in front of everyone, all the doubts will disappear. What do you think?" Boris carefully looked at the girl and asked playfully, "Are you that confident?" "Of course. I have always been very confident in my apprentices. Please wait and see." Andre's answer was very firm, without a trace of hesitation. After all, he had seen the little girl successfully cast acid sputtering with his own eyes. He didn't have to worry about making a mistake because the incantation and casting action of a level 0 arcane spell was very simple. It could be completed in 1 or 2 seconds, unlike level 2 and above magic, which needed several seconds to chant. Then what are we waiting for? Let's start. I can't wait to see the birth of a new record. I believe the others are thinking the same. Boris raised his hand and signaled the people around him step back and make a large space. On one hand, they could see more clearly, and on the other hand, they could prevent accidental injuries. Although the level 0 arcane spell cast by an apprentice wasn't enough to be fatal, no one liked to be injured for no reason. Many of the mages standing in the front row even added a layer of protection to themselves to prevent accidents. Andre stroked the girl's hair and encouraged her. "Beverly, cast your spell on that table. Don't be nervous. Just do as you usually do. After you finish the apprentice test, I have a gift for you." "Okay." The little lowly nodded her head seriously. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath to relax her tense muscles. Not long after, she suddenly opened her eyes and began to loudly chant an incantation. Everyone present could see her finger drawing a secret pattern in the air. After only 2 seconds, a liquid bullet with a pungent smell shot out from her finger and accurately hit the table not far away. In an instant, the dark green liquid splattered in all directions, corroding the surface of the table. Many places showed signs of carbonization. Arcana above. It really was a tier 0 arcana technique. That girl didn't use any scrolls or magic items. Damn it, was she a monster? No, that's not right. I should say that this pair of master and disciple are both monsters. Oh, my God, a 14-year-old official mage. An acolyte not even 10 years old. I worked hard for 20 years to become a level 2 mage. Is this the difference between me and a genius? I'm willing to bet that there must be some trick to this. Maybe it's some kind of quick way. With the success of the acid sputtering, the entire hall was once again in an uproar. Everyone couldn't help but join in the heated discussion, especially the few senior members. Their eyes shone with a fiery light, as if they had seen a rare treasure. Their breathing also became hurried. Boris looked at Andre meaningfully. After a full minute, a smile reappeared on his face. He took out a silver badge from his pocket and gently placed it in the little lowly's palm. He praised, "Very perfect casting. Congratulations, child. You now have half a foot on the path of arcane magic. If nothing unexpected happens, you'll be able to become a member of the association in at most 2 to 3 years. I'm here to welcome you in advance." "Thank you, Master." Beverly raised both of her hands and received the badge in a flattered manner. She carefully put it on her chest. She didn't know if it was because of nervousness or excitement, but her white skin showed a faint pink color, making her look especially delicate and cute. You're welcome. The association will give a corresponding reward to every acolyte who has grasped the power of Arcana. From today onwards, the library and alchemy room in the tower will be open to you. All right, go sit over there and rest for a while. I have something to discuss with your mentor. After saying that, Boris gently pushed the little girl, indicating that she could leave. After Beverly bowed and was about to turn back to her seat, Andre pulled her little hand and stuffed his furry spellbook into the little girl's arms. I just promised to give you a gift. This spellbook is the first magic item I made when I became an official mage. I'll give it to you now. Spellbook. The little lowly covered her mouth in surprise and asked in disbelief, Really? Give me your spellbook. Andre smiled and nodded. Of course, it now belongs to you. But promise me, before you become an official mage, don't touch the high-level magic recorded in it. In fact, after he obtained the spellbook of the Shadow Mage, he quickly consumed some experience points and completely copied the magic recorded in the spellbook. Therefore, this spellbook was no longer useful to him, but he couldn't sell it. For a mage, a spellbook was a very private thing. The enemy could analyze a mage's character, preferences, fighting characteristics, and so on through the arcana recorded in the spellbook. Therefore, if this thing was obsolete, many people would rather destroy it than let a second person see it. However, Andre felt that rather than wasting it, it would be better to give it to his apprentice. In any case, this little girl would be his closest assistant in the future, so he didn't have to worry about her betrayal. The excited Beverly hugged the spellbook tightly and promised loudly in ecstasy, Please rest assured, Mentor, I swear that without your permission, I won't look at any high-level spells. Hee, good girl. Go and rest. Andre intimately touched the little girl's rosy cheeks. Seeing the little girl bouncing back to her seat, President Boris sighed slightly and asked in a low voice, Tell me, how did you do it? Andre glanced at the hungry mages behind him, and a playful smile appeared on his face. He took out 2 bottles of flashing blood-red potion from his waist pouch and pretended to be mysterious as he answered, This is one of the reasons. It's a little toy that can increase intelligence. It's called the Genius Potion. It can greatly increase the intelligence level of anyone. It lasts for 4 hours, and everything learned during this time will be remembered in the brain. Of course, if the intelligence level has reached the upper limit, then the second effect is to strengthen the memory. It can allow a mage to learn 1 more arcana spell for each magic level. How is it? Isn't it magical? Chapter 277. That's impossible. The Genius Potion was lost over 2,000 years ago. The last person who could concoct such a powerful potion was the potion Grandmaster Arcane. No one has been able to do it since his death. As a great wizard who had lived for over 170 years, Boris could be said to be very knowledgeable. He had even restored a few incomplete high-grade transformation spells, so he knew how difficult it was to restore a lost formula, especially one like the Genius Potion, which could change one's thoughts and even soul. In the past few hundred years, many people had tried to restore the Genius Potion, but all of them had failed without exception. They couldn't even figure out how to do it. Now that this legendary potion that could allow one to learn magic quickly had suddenly appeared in front of them, no one would be able to remain indifferent. Intelligence was the most important attribute for a wizard. Not only did it determine the number of spell slots, the speed of learning and memory, it also determined the upper limit of spells a wizard could grasp and the number of spells they could cast. To give a simple example, before a human became a professional, their intelligence limit was 18 points, which was Andre's starting point. In this situation, they could only grasp 18 arcane spells at each level. In other words, they could only learn 18 rank 1 spells. It was the same for rank 2 arcane spells. If they wanted to learn another rank 1 arcane spell after mastering it, they would have to forget the previous one. Otherwise, their brains would explode with a bang. Don't underestimate this point. After all, most wizards didn't even have an intelligence of 18, hovering around 14. At the same time, 14 points of intelligence was the difference between a normal genius and a genius. Apart from that, intelligence also determined the success rate of learning arcane spells. Those with 18 points of intelligence had a success rate of more than 85%, while those with 14 points had a success rate of only 60%. The further one progressed, the lower the success rate. Ordinary people with 10 points of intelligence could also learn arcane spells, but their success rate was less than 40%. Moreover, the highest spell they could grasp was only rank 5. Without a doubt, intelligence not only represented a wizard's strength, but also their future development potential. Thus, when choosing an apprentice, intelligence was often the most important factor to pay attention to. In the past, in order to select satisfactory apprentices, the archmages would not hesitate to throw a group of children into the dangerous mazes they created to observe their performance when they encountered difficulties. Often, only a few out of 100 children would be able to walk out alive. It was extremely bloody and cruel. Boris could not imagine how big of a commotion it would cause if the intelligence potion were to reappear. Not only could it turn those ordinary apprentices into official mages, but it could also take in a large number of nobles, trapping their families firmly in the war chariot of the Mage Association. Master, just because others can't do it doesn't mean that my mentor can't do it. I believe that a wise person like you should understand how big the gap between people is. Moreover, there are 2 ready-made bottles here. You just need to find someone to try it, and you will know. After saying that, Andre placed the 2 glass containers that contained the genius potion in the president's hand. He then raised his arm and made an inviting gesture. After that, he stood at the side and waited quietly. Ever since he obtained the Encyclopedia of Magic Potions, he had been thinking about what potions he should use to make himself famous. After all, there were thousands of recipes for making magic potions. Even if the system had recorded all of them, it was impossible to master them all in a short period of time. Thus, it was inevitable that he would choose 1 or 2. Excluding the 60% that he could not concoct with his current spellcasting ability, he picked 2 out of the remaining 40%. One was the genius potion that could increase intelligence, and the other was the hero potion that could grant the user strong vitality and endurance. The former was targeted at the association of mages, the upper nobles, and the big merchants, while the latter was targeted at the small nobles, feudal knights, and elite adventurers. As long as he could obtain the support of about 1/5 of these people, Andre would have the capital to start stirring up trouble in the political arena of Linden City. Even if he failed in the end, no one would dare to do anything to him. This was because no matter how serious a crime a potion master committed, his life would not be in danger. At most, he would just lose some of his freedom. There was a saying that a good strategist would usually think of a way to retreat before making a move. Otherwise, he would be an impulsive idiot. Even if he won 10,000 times, he would lose everything, including his own life, as long as he failed once. On the contrary, if he prepared a way out in advance, he would have the chance to make a comeback, even if he failed 10,000 times. The reason why the strong could become the strong was that they were always well prepared and had the possibility to do it again or again. What Andre needed to do was to make full use of his advantages and let everyone see his irreplaceable value. This way, he would always be in a relatively safe state and calmly deal with all kinds of dangers. Staring at the red halo emitting from the potion bottle, Boris felt his heart beating rapidly. Even his usually steady hands were trembling slightly. However, after much consideration, he ultimately did not have the courage to experiment on himself. Instead, he waved his hand at an odd-job worker standing in the corner. "You come here, drink this bottle of medicine, and tell me how you feel." Sir President, drink it. When I die if I drink it." The boy, who looked to be only 13 years old, stammered as he squeezed the potion out of his mouth. Without a doubt, he knew that he was being used as a test subject. After all, similar experiments happened in this tower from time to time. Usually, The servants who drank this unknown liquid did not end up well. Even if they did not die, their bodies would undergo all kinds of mutations. It could be said that they were extremely miserable, which was why his face turned green with fear. I told you to drink it, so drink it. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Don't tell me you still want me to feed you? Boris narrowed his eyes and asked impatiently. At this moment, his expression did not have the slightest bit of his usual amiable appearance. His entire person was releasing a terrifying aura. It was obvious that this great mage who specialized in transmutation was not a kind person. He did not put the life of a mere servant in his eyes. He only cared about the effects of the potion and whether there were any adverse side effects. Chapter 278. Yes, I'll drink it right away. The boy didn't dare to disobey the president's orders. He opened the cork and gulped down the bright red potion, closing his eyes as he awaited his fate. He knew very well that if he drank the potion, he might have a chance of survival. If he didn't, the president would definitely kill him on the spot. Many of the official members of the Sorcerers Association looked kind and benevolent, but they all followed the same principle in their bones. Those who followed them would prosper, and those who opposed them would perish. Perhaps their relationships were relatively equal, and the acolytes who had grasped rank 0 arcane spells would receive some treatment. However, the servants weren't so lucky. Once they angered a wizard, their deaths would be in vain. André stood to the side, the corners of his mouth slightly raised as he watched this farce. A hint of playfulness flashed through his eyes as he secretly observed everyone's reactions, silently remembering them in his heart and analyzing their personalities. Who knew when it would come in handy? He had personally refined the genius potion and tested it. There were no problems with its effects and duration. The only problem was the formula. After all, the reason why no one had been able to decipher the secret of the genius potion was very simple. It was a problem with the ingredients. Perhaps no one would have thought that the most important ingredient of the potion was 50 grams of fresh brain cells, and they had to come from intelligent creatures. The strange bright red color in the bottle was the light of life emitted by the blood under the stimulation of magic. It could be said that the genius potion was a demon's potion. Only a specific part of the brain could be used to make it, and the creature had to survive when dissecting it. Only a very small part of the brain could be used to make about 10 bottles of the potion. If it weren't for the fact that there were many orcs and goblins who were heavily injured, André definitely wouldn't have used such a chilling item. He definitely wouldn't have used the genius potion himself. Just as everyone was anxiously waiting for the results, the boy's body suddenly trembled as he cried out in surprise. I think I have a reaction. My head feels so clear. I can understand everything that I didn't understand before. I become smarter. What? Let me see. A skinny middle-aged man in a black robe rushed out of the crowd and directly pressed his hand on the forehead of the handyman. A faint gray translucent fog emerged from his hand, and in the blink of an eye, the fog seeped into the handyman's head through his nose, ears, and mouth. Any mage would want to maintain their intelligence for 24 hours. However, one bottle of the potion could only last for 4 hours. A mage would need at least 3 bottles a day to satisfy their needs. 50 bottles sounded like a lot, but it might not even satisfy the needs of the chairman. André smiled and spread out his hands. There are many aspects. First, the process. The minimum requirement to concoct it is the level of a potion Grandmaster. Second, the raw materials. The genius potion needs a very special thing, and that is the brain of an intelligent creature. The higher the intelligence of the creature, the better the potion concocted. I used the brain of an orc for this batch, so the effect is only SOSO. Big brain. Ugh. When the boy who drank the potion heard these 2 words, his face changed, and he fell to the ground with a plop, retching. But it was a pity that he couldn't vomit anything apart from stomach acid. One of the most important characteristics of magic potions was their rapid absorption. Usually, drinking the potion would take less than 30 seconds, and it would spread throughout the body along with the blood. there wouldn't be a single bit of waste. Looking at the dismal expression of the little errand boy, a trace of sympathy appeared in Andre's eyes. He then asked, "How is it? Is everyone still interested in the genius potion? Drinking a bottle is equivalent to killing a life. After all, there are no intelligent creatures that can survive after their brains are cut off." In order to show the preciousness of the potion, he deliberately exaggerated the amount of brains needed. Otherwise, how could he ask for such a sky-high price? Chapter 279. I see. No wonder so many people have tried to recreate this potion, but failed. It turns out that the main problem lies in the ingredients. Who would have thought that it would require a living brain? President Boris muttered to himself while stroking his short beard. Even though he had also consumed a bottle of potion, he didn't vomit like the boy. Instead, he smacked his lips calmly. On the other hand, the necromancer, who was wearing a black robe and emitting a faint negative energy, stared at the boy's head with glowing eyes, as though he was considering whether to pry open the boy's skull to see if there were any special changes in the brain. The other mages present did not show any signs of shock. It was as if there was no psychological barrier to them consuming the brains of intelligent life forms. It was as simple as eating and drinking. They would not mind, even if a bottle of potion had to kill 10 living beings, let alone one. It was apparent that although Andre had seen through the selfish personalities of the mages, he had underestimated the hidden cruelty in their personalities. In this primitive, barbaric, and ignorant world, killing was a common thing. Sometimes, a plague, a war, or an invasion of civilization could cause corpses to be strewn all over the land within dozens of kilometers. Even the internal wars between human kingdoms often involved killing and looting, not to mention foreign races. It could be said that life was so fragile and cheap in this world. In areas where wars were frequent, a slave would only cost about 5 gold coins, which was less than a horse that pulled a carriage. After living in such an environment for a long time, one would naturally become indifferent. Moreover, the mages were powerful users of arcane spells, so they looked down on ordinary people who had neither power nor authority. Without a doubt, Boris's way of thinking was the same. He hesitated for a moment before asking, "If the association provides enough living people, can you create more genius potions?" After silently cursing the coldness of the mages, Andre nodded lightly. "Of course, but 100 bottles per month is already the limit. Moreover, I still need to nurture a few apprentices to help me. Most importantly, the apprentices who participate in the production of potions will probably never return to the association again. As for the other type of hero potion, we can mass produce it. With sufficient raw materials, we can produce 200 bottles per month. In fact, these two kinds of potions invented during the ancient magic civilization were fundamentally different from modern magic potions. They were originally created for mass production and then provided to the army on a large scale. They were not like now, where they were made by casting spells one by one. Instead, they were made in large glass containers to make 30 to 40 bottles at a time, and then they were put into small bottles separately. When distributed evenly, the EXP consumption was much lower than modern potions. "No problem. I can satisfy all your requests. As for the apprentices, you can choose any of them. They will be your private property in the future and will have nothing to do with the association. I only have one condition, and that is to guarantee the supply of the genius elixir. If the production increases in the future, you must give priority to the association." Boris did not like to beat around the bush and went straight to the point with his conditions. He knew very well that it was impossible to get the formula, so he settled for the next best thing, which was to let the Association of Mages monopolize more than 90% of the production. This way, it would not take long for the Linton City Association to become the leading association of mages in the South, leaving the other cities far behind. Andre understood the president's intentions. He smiled and bowed. "Thank you very much for your generosity. I promise that the supply will not exceed 10 bottles per month. The rest will be handled by the association." 10 bottles? Boris frowned subconsciously, but after thinking for a while, he finally agreed. then it's settled. Next, let's discuss the issue of price. Although the genius elixir is a precious potion that has been lost for a long time, it is still a very frequent consumable. I'm afraid the price won't be too high. 400 gold coins per bottle is probably the limit that the association can afford. He understood Andre's intentions. On one hand, he wanted to make a name for himself by selling the elixir to the public. On the other hand, he wanted to use the elixir to socialize. It was completely normal. Although in his opinion, it was a complete waste to give such a precious elixir to those idiotic nobles and adventurers. This was still a private matter, and it was not appropriate for others to interfere. 400 gold coins per bottle was equivalent to the price of a standard level 3 arcane spell. 100 bottles for only 40,000 gold coins was clearly not in line with Andre's expectations. He smiled playfully and suggested, "Master, I'm very sorry, but 400 gold coins per bottle is not within the range that I can accept. How about this? I'll give the association 60 bottles at 400 gold coins per bottle, and the remaining 40 bottles will be auctioned off by the association every month. The highest bidder will get the elixir, and the association will take 30% of the profits. What do you think?" Auctions were one of the most commonly used methods to maximize profits, regardless of era or place. As a city with a flourishing maritime trade, Linton City had a very famous auction house. Every once in a while, an auction would be held. There would be priceless jewels, precious ores, rare metals, and so on, as well as fine slaves, mansions, manors, artwork, paintings, and antiques. What Andre wanted to do was to use this auction house to raise the price of the elixir. He believed that those merchants with a keen sense of smell would soon spread the news of the elixir throughout the South. When that time came, countless mages would go crazy over the elixir. Would he be afraid that it wouldn't sell for a high price? Ha ha! You're very smart indeed to think of a way to maximize your profits in such a short time. All right, I agree to this condition. Congratulations. I'm afraid I'll have to call you Master now. Master Potion, Master Andre. Welcome to the Linton City Mage Association. President Boris laughed heartily as he took the lead in clapping his hands. The other members also stepped forward one after another to salute and applaud. They didn't show the slightest bit of contempt just because of Andre's overly young appearance. In the circle of mages, youth was never a problem. As long as you had the ability to reach heights that others could not reach, you would naturally receive the respect and status you deserved. Jealousy and suppression would not work here, and stealing the research results of others would be despised and ostracized by everyone. Sometimes, you might even be besieged. Chapter 280. After all, the mages of Oriar were not like the powerless scientists on Earth. Usually, the higher their intelligence, the more terrifying their future potential would be. Many of the famous legendary mages in history had risen to prominence at a young age. Just imagine how much risk it would take to snatch their research results from them. If things went wrong, it would bring disaster to oneself and one's family. Over time, there were a few established rules and unspoken rules. Unless the benefits were great enough to make people abandon everything, they would not easily violate them. After all, the invention of new arcane spells, potion formulas, and enchantment formulas was a good thing for all mages. The archmages also actively protected and encouraged the invention and creation. Most of the time, the hatred between mages did not come from jealousy, but from differences in power and ideology. For example, the traditional mages believed that they should not interfere too much in the war between ordinary people and should just stay at home and do their research. The new mages, on the other hand, believed that they could completely replace the nobles in order to start the great revival of the magic civilization. Neither side could convince the other. In the end, they could only use the most ancient method, which was violence, to determine the winner. Apart from that, the 8 major schools of magic were also quite frequent. Especially the schools that opposed each other, they had long disliked each other. Fortunately, so far, it had only been verbal. "It's an honor to meet you, Master Andre. My name is Evelyn. I'm mainly responsible for the production of low-level magic potions. If you have time in the future, I welcome you to give me some guidance." A female, mage around 50 years old, took 2 steps forward and said with a fawning face. Andre waved his hand modestly. "I don't dare to be called a master. I'm only taking out a part of my mentor's research results. When I'm done with my work, I'll definitely go take a look." Evelyn nodded with a satisfied smile. "Thank you very much. Then I'll look forward to your visit." For the rest of the time, Andre patiently introduced himself to each of the mages present, casually chatting for a while, and only after half an hour did he manage to get rid of all these green-eyed fellows. Sitting on the chair, he rubbed the muscles on his face that were a little stiff from laughing. He sighed softly. "How frighteningly passionate. I hope this won't happen again." "Passion?" Boris sneered and explained in a sarcastic tone. "Apart from a small group of people who are obsessed with research and experiments, the rest of the people in the Sorcerers Association have long been addicted to fighting for power and benefits. The only reason they are so passionate about you is because of your ability in potions. Believe me, if you lose that, they will immediately throw you into the trash. But if I can maintain this state, they will treat me as their closest friend, won't they?" As he spoke, Andre's eyes suddenly became deep, and there was a faint smile on his face. It was as if he was looking down on those mages who put the cart before the horse, and as if he was mocking himself. "Hee, looks like you're very confident in the field of pharmaceutics. Then I'll wait and see. But don't forget our deal. If I don't get what I want in 2 years, you should know how serious the consequences will be." As an old man who was nearing the end of his life, Boris's desire to prolong his life surpassed everything else. He was even showing signs of losing his mind. Andre believed that if he couldn't come up with a solution, this seemingly friendly archmage in front of him would definitely cut him into pieces and drag a large number of people down with him. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to promise, "Please rest assured, I'm a man of my word. You will definitely get what you desire the most." "I hope so. Come with me. It just so happens that Taflin has finished his training. I'll take you to see him now. At the same time, we can also solve the problem of the fire elemental bloodline." After saying that, Boris put away all the genius potions on the table and went straight to the basement. After a while, he disappeared around the corner of the stairs with Andre, leaving the 2 Lolas in the empty hall. After passing through a dark and narrow staircase, President Boris whispered a vague code on the wall at the end. The granite wall immediately flashed with a strong white light and turned into a wooden door in an instant. Without a doubt, this was the magic door that was often heard of in bard stories. They were usually disguised as walls, mirrors, cabinets, bookshelves, and windows. If one didn't know the correct spell or mechanism, they wouldn't even be able to find them, let alone open them. The mages would hide their most precious things, which might be a large amount of gold coins or some expensive treasures, in secret to prevent thieves from visiting. However, the fact that a public tower like Lincoln City had such a secret door really surprised Andre. He couldn't think of anything hidden behind it. Boris seemed to understand his thoughts at the moment. He smiled and reminded him in a half-joking tone, "Remember, no matter what you see later, don't be too surprised, because what you're about to see is the true power of the Association of Mages." After saying this, he gently pushed the door open, and a huge underground training ground immediately appeared. Under the illumination of the level, 2 arcane spell Eternal Flame. More than 40 fully armed warriors were receiving combat training. There were both men and women among them, and there were many races. There were sturdy dwarves, smart gnomes, nimble halflings, and elegant elves. There were almost all kinds of people. The training targets were huge steel golems that were more than 4 meters tall. Most of the warriors present were in small groups of 4, working together to deal with a sturdy golem that was flashing with a metallic luster. Although the hardness of steel determined that they could not really cause any damage to these magically created alchemy puppets, it was a good practice for attacking and dodging. At a glance, the clanging sounds of metal clanging could be seen. Andre narrowed his eyes and scanned the entire training ground. Soon, He found more than 40 warriors, each of them as strong as a feudal knight. These golems were the most terrifying killing machines. They had no fear of death, and didn't even have the ability to think independently. They would only obey the orders of their masters. In addition to their bodies that were made of pure steel, except for strong men with heavy blunt weapons and spells, the most anyone could do was leave a scar on their surface. Chapter 281. Andre finally understood why the Association of Mages could become one of the three major powers alongside the churches and nobles. These powerful warriors and a dozen magic statues were the reason. Although their numbers didn't seem to be large, if they were paired with a small number of mages, they could guarantee victory even against thousands of elite troops, and a victory with zero casualties. After all, the combination of mages, magic statues, and high-level warriors have been widely used since the time of the ancient magic civilization. Among them, the magic statues were qualified meat shields. Their resistance to attacks was top-notch, and they were responsible for rushing to the front to attract attacks. Mages were natural controllers. Powerful arcane evocation spells could shatter the enemy's defenses. Enchantment spells could make enemies kill each other, and illusion spells could confuse the enemy. As for the high-level warriors, they were perfect killing machines. They worked together with the magic statues to strangle enemies who had fallen into chaos. With the three working together, they could easily crush opponents 10 or 20 times their number. The ancient magic civilization had used this tactic to defeat one powerful enemy after another. In the end, they had become so arrogant that they thought they could destroy and replace the gods. It was obvious that the Association of Mages had imitated the ancient magic civilization and formed their own armed forces. They were not inferior to the most elite knights of the nobles, as well as the paladins of the churches. Boris pointed at the warriors who were training hard in the training ground and asked proudly, "How is it? Do you understand what I said before? As mages, we have our own standpoints. We don't need to agree with the nobles. As long as this force exists, no matter who rules Linton City in the future, they must give the association the best treatment." Andre nodded thoughtfully. "I see. I didn't expect such a huge secret to be hidden under the tower. But are you sure they won't be bought over by other powers?" "Huh. Of course not. As a matter of fact, the formation of this core force started hundreds of years ago when the Association of Sorcerers was established. After a long period of development, no one else in the association knows about it except for the president. I believe that with your intelligence, you should be very clear about the reason I brought you here, right?" Boris turned around as he spoke, his eyes flashing with a sharp light. "You mean, you want me to become the next president?" Andre asked, raising his eyebrows in surprise. He could not believe that such a good thing would happen to him. After all, the president of the Sorcerers Association was not a puppet with no real power. The person who sat in this position would not only become the actual owner of the tower, but also be able to mobilize a large amount of resources for their own use. Usually, the position would be held by the person with the highest level among the sorcerers. Boris laughed and stroked the beard on his chin. "Huh, that was right. You're the most talented junior I've ever seen. You're also very experienced in handling things. You don't seem like a teenager at all. Most importantly, I suddenly realized that something called ambition is rapidly growing in your heart. After I obtain the method to extend my lifespan, I will leave for a period of time and find a place where there is no one around to slowly recover my strength. Rather than handing the association over to someone else, why don't I hand it over to you first?" Bait. It was a blatant seduction. Even though Andre had seen through his tricks, he had to admit that it was very tempting to become the leader of all the mages in this city. After hesitating for a few seconds, he took a deep breath and spread out his hands with a bitter smile. "All right, I have to say that your conditions have moved me. Tell me, what price do I need to pay? Or rather, what do I need to guarantee in order to gain your approval and support? There's no hurry. It won't be too late to talk about it after you obtain that item. Now, tell me, what is your level as a sorcerer, and what is your specialization?" Don't try to lie, because I can feel that the magic energy around your body is very active. It's definitely not something that a low-level sorcerer can compare to. After saying that, Boris did not force him, nor did he cast a prophecy spell to probe him. He just silently looked at Andrei's fiery eyes. Without a doubt, this was a test from the president. Perhaps it was because of the rapid increase in strength that gave him away, or perhaps it was because he had taken out too many potions and spells at once, which aroused his vigilance. In any case, this great sorcerer chose to lay his cards on the table at this moment. As a smart person, Andrei quickly realized that he had to speak the truth. Otherwise, the trust he had built up before would immediately be shattered. So he pretended to shrug his shoulders helplessly. Level 7. This is my true level as a sorcerer. As for my specialization, I don't have it. I'm a generalist sorcerer. Level 7? And a generalist? A trace of unconcealable surprise flashed across Boris's face. He immediately shook his head and sighed. This is unbelievable. Are you sure you're a human and not some long-lived race that has lived for hundreds of years? I'm very sure that I'm a human. At most, I've inherited some fire elemental bloodline. I have nothing to do with long-lived races for the time being. Andrei used a half-joking tone to tease himself as he cast his gaze towards the innermost part of the training ground. This was because he had already seen Eunice holding a long sword in one hand and a long whip in the other. She was fighting against a huge steel golem. Even the end of her tail was equipped with a sharp triangular blade. Whether it was her pace or attack speed, there's a world of difference compared to over a month ago, especially those streamlined muscles, which almost perfectly reflected the combination of gentleness and strength. It was very obvious that this half-demon was already an outstanding warrior. She walked the path of agility, attacking as much as possible at vital points in order to achieve a fatal blow. Boris noticed Andrei's gaze, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. He said very playfully, "How is it? My training isn't bad, right? It has indeed improved a lot. But is this the demonkin warrior you speak of? Why don't I feel any difference from an ordinary warrior?" Andrei asked without turning his head. Demonkin warriors are mixed blood warriors with demon or devil bloodlines. Their bone structure and muscle strength far surpass that of humans. Although they look very slender and soft, their strength has already surpassed the limits of humans. They are almost comparable to ogres. Moreover, she can use Charm Human 3 times a day, Immobilization once, and Invisibility once. Although she is only a level 3 Demonkin warrior, she is completely comparable to a level 7 warrior in terms of battle. However, there are always disadvantages to everything. As a price, Demonkin warriors usually increase their strength rather slowly. Moreover, they are restricted by their bloodline. For example, the descendants of succubi usually have a hard time exceeding level 10. Chapter 282. Hearing the chairman's detailed explanation, Andrei instantly understood the characteristics of this special class. He nodded in realization. So that's how it is. According to what you've said, Eunice's constitution is almost the same as an ogre's? Boris hesitated for a moment before giving an answer. Her strength is slightly lower, and there's a certain gap in her constitution. Her dexterity is about twice that of an ogre's. If combined with her spell-like abilities, she should have no problem defeating an adult ogre. After all, the intelligence of most ogres was a little, well, it wasn't that they were mentally retarded. They were just a little stupid. Some ogres were very smart, and could even become mages. However, compared to the cunning Taffrin, they were nothing. They would be provoked with the slightest provocation, and could not use their terrifying strength. They were often lured into traps by human adventurers and killed. Of course, ogre mages were still very powerful. Their intelligence combined with their monstrous strength was enough to give anyone a headache. In the history of Lincoln City, there have been several instances where the ogre mages had led an army of monsters. Each time, they had suffered heavy losses. If not for the tall and sturdy walls as their last resort, the city would have fallen countless times. Equivalent to an adult ogre. Andre muttered to himself, secretly calculating Eunice's current state. According to the data given by the system and his own attributes, he estimated that a normal adult male with a strength of 10 would be able to carry 50 kilograms of weight. Of course, this limit did not only refer to carrying 50 kilograms of weight, but also to carrying 50 kilograms of weight for more than an hour without any obvious decrease in physical strength. As for how long one could last, it would depend on their constitution. As for just lifting without moving, it would be around 100 kilograms, and the maximum weight they could carry could reach 250 kilograms. They were much stronger than normal men on Earth. According to the results of his private tests, he also discovered that the increment of his strength attribute did not stack bit by bit. Instead, it would multiply once it reached a certain point. According to the descriptions in the books, ogres could easily carry over 300 kilograms of prey without affecting their movement, running, and fighting. They were several times stronger than humans. If converted to strength attribute, ogres should be between 20 to 21. The maximum strength of a human was 18, and Eunice had exceeded that limit, but was slightly lower than these monsters, so it should be 19. What kind of concept was 19 points in strength? This meant that she could lift objects that weighed more than 600 kilograms above her head, which was equivalent to lifting an adult bull. She could even throw an electric tricycle from Earth as a weapon. Although they had not reached the level of giants and dragons, whose physical attack power was calculated in tons, they were far more powerful than ordinary people. They could even break the bones of ordinary people with a wave of their hands. With her great strength, her jumping ability was close to 4 times that of an ordinary person. Even if she took off on the spot, she could easily jump more than 5 meters. Her run-up could even exceed 3 meters. Moreover, these movements did not contain any technical skills. Otherwise, she would have broken the world record on Earth in minutes. It should be noted that Orier was still in the era of cold weapons. This meant that Eunice could easily split her opponent into 2 halves in battle. She could kick a large hole in a breastplate made of fine steel. As for the person inside, needless to say, his chest would collapse and he would definitely be dead. After thinking about this, Andre could not help but silently exclaim that the magic world was indeed terrifying. It could actually train one's body to such a level. It was no wonder that melee professions could fight their way out under the comprehensive suppression of arcane and divine spells. Not only were they not eliminated, but they were also thriving. If he had a microscope, he would definitely take some skin, muscle, and blood samples to explore and find out where the abnormalities were. However, it was a pity that the Oleo continent could not even produce glass without bubbles, let alone something as high-end as a microscope lens. The level of craftsmanship was too low, so he could only keep it in mind for now and study it when he had the chance in the future. Perhaps Andre had regained Boris's trust after telling him his true level as a sorcerer. Boris's old face once again put on a harmless smile. He waved at a male warrior with obvious elven features not far away. "Elgin, come here." The latter hurried a few steps forward and bowed respectfully with one hand on his chest. "Mr. President, how come you have time to come to the training ground today? And you even brought a stranger with you? You should know the rules here." Boris laughed and gave the warrior a warm hug. He laughed and replied, "Ha, don't be so rigid, Elgin. You're only 460 years old. As a moon elf, you're still quite young. You should learn to be flexible instead of sticking to those rotten rules. Let me introduce you. This young man is Andre. He's not a stranger. He's the successor I'm most satisfied with so far." "So far?" The male elf called Elgin immediately frowned. "That means you're still not sure if he's the next president? Don't worry. If there are any unexpected changes, I'll take care of all the problems myself. I won't make things difficult for you." Boris's eyes flashed with a cold light. Andre, who was standing by the side, shrugged and smiled. "I promise you, you'll never have such troubles." He knew what the changes and troubles Elgin was talking about. If he did not produce the life-prolonging spell he promised, he would immediately suffer the wrath of a great sorcerer who specialized in transmutation. Elgin looked at the two suspiciously for a long time. In the end, he sighed and said, "Although I don't know what kind of deal you two have in private, please remember one thing. Don't bring a conflict of interest here. We will always obey the leadership of the current president. Once there's a change, there's no turning back. Of course, my dear friend, I've made an oath since the day I took over as president. I've never broken it before, and I won't break it in the future. Now, help me call Taflin over. Her training here is over. It's time for her to return to her master's side and do her duty." Boris said and patted the elf's shoulder lightly. Obviously, he didn't want to dwell on this issue. He directly stated his intentions. Chapter 283. As you wish. Els bowed meticulously and turned to walk towards the inner part of the training ground. Once he was far away, Boris took a deep breath and warned in a low voice, "Remember, even if you infuriate the four dukes in Linton City, do not provoke this moon elf. Otherwise, even I won't be able to do anything about it." "Oh, who is he? How could he make an archmage like you so helpless?" Andre asked with a face full of shock. It was important to know that warriors were at a disadvantage when facing mages. This was especially so after reaching the 7th level. A mage's attack and defense would increase exponentially. As long as the difference between the two professions did not exceed 6 levels, a mage would have a high chance of winning. What was the level of the president's mage? At least level 13, 6 levels higher than him. That meant he was level 19, a level 19 warrior. Just a little bit more, and he would enter the ranks of legends. He would complete the transformation from a mortal to an extraordinary being. Andre could not imagine how such a powerful person could appear in the underground training ground of the Association of Mages. From the conversation just now, he could analyze that the president was completely independent of the association. He was like an unknown guardian, protecting the tower from invaders. A warrior protecting a group of mages? This joke was not funny at all. Boris watched the changes in Andre's expression with great interest. Finally, he shook his head with a smile. "It seems that you've misunderstood me. Elgang's warrior level is not as high as you think. He's only level 10, but he has another advanced profession. That's the magic sword dancer, unique to the moon elves. Although he's only level 5, those who have seen such magnificent swordsmanship are all dead, including 2 level 10 mages." Sword dancer? Is there such a profession in the world? How come I've never seen it in books? After listening to the president's explanation, Andre's furrowed brows did not relax. Instead, they furrowed even more. When he lived with the necromancer, he had read almost all the contents of the necromancer's private library. He had never even heard of the sword dancer profession. The sword dancer is a very secretive profession. It is said that it is related to some lost magic skills of the elves. I don't know the details, but one thing is certain. This profession can enchant their weapons with specific magic during battle. Elgang chose exorcism. His sword had a 30% chance of dispelling the target's defenses, regardless of whether it was a divine spell or an arcane spell. In addition, there are countless hidden advanced professions in this world. Most of the time, mages are not in an advantageous position, so don't let your guard down. Otherwise, you might lose your life at any time. Before Boris could finish his sentence, Ergang walked over with Eunice. He bowed and left without saying a word. His expression was as cold as ice. Looking at his thin back, the president sighed slightly, turned around, closed the door, and whispered a secret code. In an instant, a layer of black fog surged out of the wooden door. A second later, it returned to a stone wall, and there were no sounds of fighting inside. It was as if everything he had seen and heard was an illusion. Patting the rough rock lightly, Boris turned to Andre and said, "All right, let's call it a day. It's getting late. You should go back and rest. I have to inform the dukes about the potions and the border forest. Think of what you need as soon as possible. They will come to find you soon. As for the trouble caused by the fire elemental bloodline, I'm afraid I'll be busy for a while. We'll talk about it after the council meeting." "After the council meeting? Could it be you intend to watch me be surrounded by a large group of noble ladies?" Andre asked, dumbfounded. Boris's eyes were full of mockery as he laughed. Ha 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 ha. What? Don't you like being surrounded by a group of young and beautiful noble ladies? You should know that this is the envy of countless men. Go enjoy it, it's good to be young. Having said that, he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. A white light flashed, and his entire person disappeared without a trace. Andre didn't expect the president to joke about this at all. He rubbed his forehead hard, gritting his teeth as he cursed in a low voice. Damn it. I don't want this kind of luck at all. And you promised that you would help me solve this problem. As soon as he finished speaking, Boris's voice sounded in his ears. Child, I did promise to help you solve your problem, but I didn't say when. Remember, this is your punishment for hiding your rank as a wizard. At the same time, you should learn a lesson. Don't think that you're the only smart person in the world. Evidently, these voices came from the president's rank 0 arcane spell, message spell. Its function was similar to a wireless headset, communicating within the range of the spell. Apart from the two parties involved, no one else would be able to hear anything. No matter how stupid Andre was, he knew that this was President Boris deliberately taking revenge on him. Unfortunately, he had no way of retaliating, so he could only pout and complain, All right, I reap what I sow this time. I hope those noble ladies can be more reserved. Otherwise, I can only use invisibility potions to solve the problem. There was an old saying that said, if you can't afford to provoke, can't you avoid it? After all, the main purpose of the relationship between the two sexes was to make each other happy. As for giving birth to offspring, it was just a side effect. Once the roles were reversed, at least 90% of people would find it boring. As for being used as a seeding machine, any man with a bit of dignity would probably reject it without hesitation. Nobles were not fools. They only wanted to integrate the special bloodline into their own family. This also meant that if they really gave birth to offspring, they would definitely be given the mother's surname and then marry within the family. The child might not even know who his father was for the rest of his life. The famous Dragon Knight in the history of Lincoln City was said to have had relations with tens of thousands of noble ladies and had more than thousands of offspring. But what happened in the end? He didn't even keep his family and surname, completely disappearing from the noble class. To be precise, he was integrated. Perhaps in the eyes of many people in this world, being able to integrate one's own bloodline into the noble class was something to be proud of. This was especially true for the Dragon Knight, who had enjoyed great fame, many beautiful women, endless aftertastes of fine wine, and countless delicacies. After his death, his story was turned into a story that was sung everywhere by bards. To this day, many young people still idolized him, desiring to live the same luxurious life. Chapter 284. However, as a transmigrator from Earth, Andre could tell at a glance that this fellow was actually being toyed with by the nobles. He kept sowing seeds like a fool, not knowing how to train the ability in his bloodline and not caring about his own body. He sowed seeds day and night, and in the end, died of exhaustion. What was even more tragic was that he didn't know anything. One had to know that a dragon descendant with a rich bloodline could live for at least 500 years. But this fellow had only lived for 350 years. It could be seen how much he had been oppressed. It was as if he had died from exhaustion. Thinking that he would soon face the same problem, Andre couldn't help but shiver. He muttered to himself, Damn it, if I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have chosen to activate any bloodline. Don't worry, my dear master. If there's a need, I can help you deal with those noble ladies. Sometimes, with a little charm magic and some seductive techniques, I can quickly make them fall for you. I'm an expert in this field. Eunice licked her bright red lips and said seductively next to his ear. She was wearing a dark red scale armor, shoulder guards, arm guards, skirt armor, leg guards, and boots embedded with steel plates. Everything was painted dark red, and she had a black cloak with a hood and the symbol of the Sorcerers Association on her back. She could be said to be fully armed, a standard warrior's outfit. One hand held a one-handed broadsword that was slightly wider than an ordinary longsword, while the other held a long whip full of barbs. If one was careless and got hit by it, one's skin would definitely be torn open. Perhaps it was because the demon bloodline in his body had been fully activated. The horns on his forehead had become much thicker. The whites of his eyes were a strange black, but his pupils were still blood red. His originally fiery red hair had also dimmed a little, turning into a blackish red color. The skin all over his body was like a boiled crab, constantly emitting a strong smell of sulfur. Two sharp teeth were slightly protruding from the corners of his mouth, and an agile tail was swaying behind him. It could be said that if it weren't for the fact that her feet hadn't turned into hooves and she was missing a pair of wings, she was basically no different from a real demon. Especially the strong smell of sulfur. Anyone with a little common sense would be alerted after smelling it. Of course, the last one was the silver snake-shaped necklace that hung around her slender neck. Most people probably didn't know that this seemingly beautiful and sexy little accessory was actually something that could take one's life. With just a single incantation, it could instantly send a fatal poison into the blood vessels. Andre gently pushed Taffrin, who was clinging to his back, and said in a half-joking tone, "Charm spell? Seduction technique. Did you learn these things in a little more than a month?" Eunice shrugged her shoulders indifferently. With a flick of her wrist, the long whip was directly like a snake, instantly reaching towards the torch not far away. Then she pulled hard, and the torch was forcibly pulled down from the rack. The other hand that was holding the broadsword fiercely swung, and with a clang, the hardwood torch was cut in half. After everything that had happened last night, she slightly raised her chin proudly and asked with a smile, "How is it, dear master? Do you have a new understanding of me now?" Looking at the flat surface of the torch on the ground, Andre showed a trace of surprise. The corner of his mouth slightly raised, and he very playfully replied, "Very good. I didn't expect that you actually learned the dual-wielding technique." According to the description in the book Profession Introduction, warrior. Generally speaking, most warrior professions would either choose a powerful two-handed weapon or a combination of a one-handed weapon and a shield. It was very rare for two hands to use two weapons at the same time, because a normal person's brain and reflexes couldn't do two things at the same time, let alone two completely different types of weapons. However, there were always a small number of strange people in the world who had talents that ordinary people could never reach. Scholars called this talent dual wielding. People with this talent had more reflexes than ordinary people, and they could naturally do two things at the same time. With a little bit of training, they could fight with two different weapons at the same time. In professional terms, it was called dual-wielding technique. Andre completely didn't expect that this half-demon woman in front of him was actually a rare dual-wielding demon. Generally speaking, when people with this kind of talent chose a profession, 90% of them would lean towards a thief instead of a warrior. Haha, I've completely accepted everything contained in my bloodline, including spell-like abilities, all kinds of knowledge, battle techniques, and experience. Otherwise, how do you think I was able to improve so much in just a little over a month? After saying this, Eunice hung the whip on her belt and sheathed her broadsword. She stroked her long black and red hair, showing a mixture of temptation, bloodthirst, and maturity. Without a doubt, the source of her bloodline was definitely a succubus, so she would always inadvertently tease the nerves of those around her. Especially after completely embracing the power in her body, she was like a blooming poppy. Not only did the demonic characteristics not weaken her attractiveness, but it also added a sense of depravity. Staring at those strange black and red eyes, Andre lightly sighed. He took off the sword of the king's blood and handed it over. "Here, take this sword as a gift to celebrate your transformation." "Gift?" Eunice hesitantly looked at the gorgeous scabbard inlaid with gems and gold, as well as the exquisite patterns on the hilt. In her opinion, rather than a weapon for killing, it was more like an ornament or a piece of art. It had no practical use at all. Generally speaking, a sword for killing didn't need any decorations. It was enough as long as it was strong and sharp enough. Extra decorations would only destroy the balance of the sword and affect the user's senses. Don't be fooled by its appearance. This is a genuine magic sword. Not only is it incomparably sharp, but it also has the ability to steal the life of its victim, Andre softly reminded after seeing the confusion in Tayflin's eyes. In fact, he also felt that the weapon's decorations were too extravagant, but considering that the previous owner of the sword was a true human king, it wasn't strange for it to be extravagant. Magic weapon? Eunice cried out in surprise and immediately grasped the hilt of the sword. With a clang, she pulled out the sword of the king's blood. The sword emitted a dark red light that instantly illuminated the dark tunnel. She raised her finger and gently ran it across the blade. Soon, she felt the evil magic attached to it. A trace of unconcealable ecstasy appeared on her beautiful face, and she muttered to herself, "Oh, this is a really exciting gift. I can't help but want to stab it into someone's chest." Chapter 285. You'd better suppress those crazy thoughts immediately. Remember, you can't kill anyone without my orders. Andre glared at her and warned. He knew all too well what kind of perverted hobbies this female half-demon had. Whipping, torturing, humiliating, killing, and perhaps even masochistic tendencies, so he had to draw a red line in advance. Otherwise, blood would flow like a river in the end. Don't worry, I'll strictly follow your orders. But you'd better confirm who the enemy is, or I'm afraid I won't be able to hold back. Eunice took a step forward and flashed behind Andre, sticking out her tongue and licking his neck. Andre felt his entire body go numb and couldn't help but shudder. He immediately turned his head and glared at her. This is the last warning. If there's a next time, I don't mind giving you some punishment. Now, put on your hood. I don't want to attract the attention of passers-by. Eunice covered her face with her hood and shrugged with a playful smile. As you wish, my dear master. Let's go. I still have many things to do today. Andre ignored the half-demon behind him and walked straight to the hall on the first floor. Since he was back in the city, he naturally wanted to see how Bonnie the Black Lilies Guild was going. After all, it was an important part of his next plan and related to whether he could obtain the necessary information in time. Apart from that, he also had to set up a merchant guild that belonged to him, so that he could slowly expand his influence and rope in nobles and merchants through benefits, and establish a huge interest group with himself as the center. Calculating the time, it wouldn't be long before Lady Anasta of Westia returned to Lincoln City with the first batch of salt. When that time came, the entire upper class would definitely explode, and countless people would be eager to get a piece of this huge cake. It was the best time to rope in allies, and the prerequisite for this was that he had to have a merchant guild first. Andre went to the second floor of the Sorcerers Association, where they specialized in purchasing ancient items. He sold off all the jewelry he got from his exploration of the ruins. After that, he dragged a leather bag filled with more than 8,000 gold coins, which was more than 40 kilograms of gold. He went straight to the entrance of the basement. Fortunately, the gold coins of the Green Sea Alliance were relatively light. Each one weighed about 5 grams. If it were the extra large tourist gold coins of the Cantero Kingdom, with his pitiful 7 points of strength, he probably wouldn't even be able to move them. It was no wonder that when large companies and nobles did business with each other, they would often use bills backed by their reputations. Gold coins were just too heavy, especially for large transactions that involved tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of gold coins. If they were to use gold and silver coins to pay, they would need several carriages to transport the gold coins, not to mention the fact that there wouldn't be that much gold coins. Silently reminiscing about the black-hearted banks on Earth and the constantly depreciating notes, Andre quickly replenished a dozen arcane spells between level 0 and level 3. After that, he returned to the hall with less than 500 gold coins left. Beverly, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately jumped up from her chair and hugged his leg. She pointed at the 6 older girls standing not far behind them and said, "Teacher, look, I've found all the sisters who used to take care of me here. Hee, well done. This is your reward. Take it and buy something you like." As he said that, Andre affectionately patted the little lowly's head. He took out a handful of gold coins, about 50 of them, and stuffed them all into the little leather bag that she always carried with her. For me, Beverly opened her mouth wide in shock. She lowered her head to look at the shiny gold coins, and her eyes were instantly covered with a layer of mist. One had to know that before this, she had never even touched gold coins. Her pocket money was usually only a few silver coins, and this was only after Andre appeared. After all, children from poor families should feel fortunate to be able to fill their stomachs. As for pocket money, it was a benefit that only children from rich families can enjoy. The little lowly cherished every shiny and hard-earned pocket money very much. She carefully saved it and was never willing to spend a single bit. She was prepared to use it when she learned magic. When she was working as a handyman in the Mage Tower, she had fully understood how terrifying the cost of learning magic was. Children from ordinary families couldn't possibly afford it at all. After all, a mentor wasn't obligated to bear the cost of an apprentice, and the gold coins needed to advance from an apprentice to an official mage was an astronomical figure. Otherwise, it wouldn't be only nobles and big merchants who could afford it. However, the little lowly had never imagined that she would suddenly obtain a spellbook that countless people could only dream of. There were even dozens of spells recorded in the book. Now, she even had a large amount of gold coins in her bag. For a moment, she was extremely moved. Quietly wiping away her tears, she buried her head in her robe and softly said, "Thank you, teacher, you're the best to me." As soon as her voice fell, a row of information immediately appeared in Andre's vision. Apprentice, Beverly has an extremely favorable impression of you. Intimacy level has increased to 100 points. Congratulations! You have completed the second stage of intimate intimacy. You have randomly obtained a magic staff blueprint. Congratulations! You have obtained a fireball magic staff blueprint. In an instant, a crumpled piece of parchment appeared in his palm. He patted Beverly's back to comfort her, and at the same time, opened the blueprint and glanced at it. What he saw was written on it: Fireball Magic Staff. Minimum requirement, level 5 mage. Cost, 900 experience points. Maker must be proficient in the fireball spell. Required materials: a large magic beast bone, 50 milliliters of fire elemental energy rich creature's blood, a half-foot long branch or core of a magic plant, 2 fingernail-sized rubies, 20 grams of diamond dust. As for the latter part, there were some external designs as well as special patterns that needed to be drawn on the magic staff. At the end, it also explained the influence of the quality of the materials and the mage's level on the magic staff. It had to be said that this thing was really a good thing. It could greatly alleviate Andre's current problem of having too few spell slots. Although he had copied a lot of scrolls for this, just in case, there was a certain interval between each use of scroll. However, a magic staff didn't have this concern. Moreover, the fireball spell had always been the most destructive spell among the level 3 arcane spells. With this magic staff, he could save more spell slots to memorize defensive, summoning, and control spells. One must know that a magic staff blueprint wasn't something that could be obtained casually. Almost all individuals, countries, and mage organizations that had mastered this technology would classify it as a first-class secret. Even internal members couldn't take a look at it. At most, they could only obtain the finished product. Chapter 286. However, this was not surprising. After all, the wand's lethality was too terrifying for ordinary people. Even the relatively weak level 0 and level 1 arcane spells were enough to cause terrible consequences. Imagine a wand with 30 magic missiles stored in it. Suddenly, it was aimed at a place where the crowd was concentrated and fired. The red light of the missiles was comparable to that of bullets as they whistled through the air and hit the target one after another. After a few seconds, only corpses were left on the ground. How shocking would that hellish scene be? By the same principle, similar methods could be used on the battlefield, especially weapons like the fireball magic wand, which did not need too many. Aiming at the enemy's phalanx and shooting 20 to 30 missiles in one breath could directly break the psychological defenses of most ordinary soldiers, resulting in a large-scale collapse. To some extent, the wand was equivalent to a hot weapon that appeared in the era of cold weapons. It was completely cheating. Except for the real professionals, no one could even resist. Fortunately, this kind of technology was now in the hands of very few strong people and rarely appeared in wars. Even if it did appear, it would disappear in a flash. Because of the high cost and complicated craftsmanship, it was impossible for this kind of thing to be popularized. Looking at this list, there are the bones of large magic beasts, the blood of fire elemental creatures, branches or tree cores of magic plants, and 2 pieces of rubies the size of a fingernail. Which one of them was not priceless? What was a large magic beast? According to the definition in the Monster Illustrated Handbook, this kind of creature first had to be larger than an adult human in size and weight. Then, it had to have at least one supernatural ability, such as a winter wolf that could spit out yeast gas, or a snow bear that could increase its size and strength by 1/3 in a short time. If one encountered such an animal in the wilderness, it was considered lucky to not die, not to mention to kill it and bring back its bones alive. Therefore, each piece of bone was expensive. Next was the blood of the fire elemental creature. Without a doubt, it was not easy to obtain it. The easiest way was to go to the vicinity of an active volcano and look for a reptile called the fire lizard. They were 4 to 5 meters long and had a long, wide, flat brain and especially strong and sharp teeth. They could easily bite their prey to pieces and could even spit out fan-shaped flames from their mouth. How difficult was it to kill such a monster? Just ask an experienced adventurer and you'll know. They would tell you that first, you had to have an enchanted weapon because ordinary weapons could not split open the hard scales of the fire lizard. Second, you had to be able to withstand the temperature of more than 60 degrees. Lastly, you had to be careful of the hot lava flowing around you. In short, if you were not careful, you would die without a burial place. As for magic plants, they only grew in forests and mountains with rich magic energy. Just looking for them, a lot of time and energy, not to mention the dangers along the way. 2 rubies the size of a fingernail were the easiest to obtain, but each would cost several hundred to several thousand gold coins. A complete set of materials would cost at least 100 to 150,000 gold coins. In addition, it would also require a mage of level 5 or above to cast a spell to recharge it. Just the cost alone would be 200,000 gold coins. How many countries or organizations would be able to afford such large-scale equipment? Of course, the most important thing was still the blueprints. Ever since the collapse of the ancient magic civilization, almost all of the wand-making techniques that they were so proud of had been lost. Only a very small amount of incomplete information had been passed down. Those countries and organizations that had the wand-making techniques had studied the information and restored a small part of it, and most of them were auxiliary techniques. Andre could already imagine how big of a sensation this blueprint would cause if it was spread out, so he quickly put it in his pocket. He was going to start collecting materials to make a wand for self-defense after the council meeting. After putting away the blueprint, he took a deep breath and suppressed the excitement in his heart. He squatted down and intimately pinched the little lowly's face. Well, I didn't give you too much pocket money before, mainly to prevent you from secretly doing some dangerous experiments. But as you learn more and more, you have to start all kinds of practice. So from next month, you can get 25 gold coins every week to buy magic materials. Long live my mentor. Hearing this good news, Beverly was so happy that she danced and waved her little fists and shouted. Looking at the little girl's excited appearance, Andre smiled and shook his head. He directly threw the rest of the gold coins in the bag to Chloe. I just sold all the spoils of war that I found in the maze. These are your share. Receiving rewards after the adventure. I used to like this part the most when I was reading adventure stories. I didn't expect that I would receive rewards one day. Chloe excitedly opened the leather bag and glanced at it. Soon, a satisfied smile appeared on her face. In fact, she didn't care about the amount of money in the bag. She just liked the process of receiving rewards through her adventure. After all, as the only heir of the Mariel family, even a pair of silk stockings on her body cost 300 gold coins. They were made from the silk of a giant spider in cold regions. It was said that wearing them for a long time could make the skin more delicate, and at the same time increase the charm of a woman. A few hundred gold coins were not even enough to be considered pocket money for her. "How is it? Are you satisfied with the rewards of this adventure?" Andre asked in a joking tone. "It's okay. If only I could get a little more." Chloe pursed her lips and pretended to be greedy as she replied, "Huh, be content. As a rookie, you can get a few hundred gold coins in your first adventure. In addition, it took less than a week. Ordinary adventurers would be jealous if they heard about it. Don't think that all adventurers are like the protagonists in stories. They can casually explore ruins and find treasures. Many of them can only fill their stomachs. What you have is already equivalent to their 1 or 2 months to half a year's income." After saying that, Andre lightly knocked on the girl's head. He turned and walked toward the 6 apprentices and odd job workers standing at the side. Obviously, these 6 12 to 13 years old girls were selected by him to help him concoct potions. Due to the lack of time, he could only let Beverly find someone she was familiar with. Generally speaking, those who were willing to help others for free were not too bad-hearted. Moreover, girls were relatively easier to control than boys. After all, boys were ambitious creatures. They were very susceptible to all kinds of temptations, such as power, money, women, and so on. If they were careless, they would be caught by their enemies. This was especially true for boys who had not yet matured. In this aspect, their resistance to temptation was particularly weak. Moreover, they especially liked to think that they were clever. They were undoubtedly big trouble. Chapter 287. Looking at the nervous faces of the girls, Andre didn't beat around the bush and went straight to the point. "I believe you all already know that I am in urgent need of a few apprentices to help me concoct potions. The condition is very simple. You have to master all the contents of elementary potions within half a month, or you will be eliminated. After passing the test, each of you will receive a sum of money every month. At the same time, you will be allowed to observe my classes and experiments. As for how much knowledge you can learn, it will depend on your own efforts. In the end, no matter whether you can become an official mage in the future, I am afraid you will have to say goodbye to your freedom. I will prepare a strict magic contract for those who pass the test, to ensure that the potion formulas will not be leaked. Now I will give you 1 minute to consider. If you feel that it is unacceptable, you can choose to withdraw immediately." It had to be said that permanently restricting the free time of others was a very excessive thing to do. However, in order to ensure a technical monopoly, he had no choice but to do so. After all, many of the formulas recorded in the book, Encyclopedia of Magic Potions, were very easy to produce in batches. In addition, he also planned to introduce assembly line technology. Once the formula was leaked, it would become very troublesome. The tallest girl hesitated for a moment, then immediately stood out and bowed. "Master, I am willing to accept all the conditions, and thank you for giving me a chance to change my fate." "I'm also willing." "Me too." With one taking the lead, the rest of the girls also expressed their agreement. For them, instead of staying in the association's tower all day long and doing the work of servants, waiting for an almost impossible hope, it was better to seize this opportunity. Otherwise, once they were over 18 years old, they would lose the qualification to become an apprentice. They would either become the playthings of some mages or become the consumables of some dangerous experiments. "Very good. Then from today onwards, you are my people and have nothing to do with the association. In the next half a month, Beverly will be responsible for teaching you elementary potions. After half a month, I will come back for the test. Remember, in the future, she will be the chief apprentice, the leader of all of you. Now go and pack your things. We will set off in 10 minutes. After finishing his words, Andre waved his hand, indicating that the girls could leave. He didn't intend to waste too much time and energy on training these half-grown children who already had their own independent outlook on life and values, because they had already missed the best age to develop their minds. At most, they could only be assistants or staff officers. Watching the girls disappear around the corner of the stairs, the little lowly blinked her eyes and asked curiously, "Teacher, do you really want me to teach my sisters pharmaceutics? They're much older than me." "Of course. Didn't you already learn all the contents of that book? Remember, for mages, age is not an obstacle. Look at me. I'm not even 15 years old yet, but I'm already called a master by many people in their 60s and 70s. Work hard, my adorable apprentice. I have high hopes for you." After saying that, Andre gently patted the girl's head with a faint smile on his face. Beverly clenched her fists and tried her best to stick out her chest. She seriously promised, "Please don't worry. I won't let you down." "Huh, then I'll first look forward to your—" Before Andre could finish his words, Eunice, who had been following behind him, suddenly covered her mouth and laughed. She stepped forward and poked the girl's forehead with her finger. She teased, "What a naive and adorable little thing. You were actually fooled by a few words." "Who are you?" The little lowly pouted and glared angrily at Eunice. "Aha, who am I? Why don't you try guessing?" Eunice obviously found the girl's angry look very amusing, so she continued to tease her in a very frivolous tone. Andre could even see the corner of her mouth slightly raised under the hood, her expression full of playfulness and playfulness. As a particularly smart lowly, Beverly didn't only know how to act cute. After calming down, she rolled her eyes and instantly pounced on Taflin. She grabbed the tail hidden under the hood and laughed loudly. "Hee hee, I caught it. You're that Annie with horns on her head." Eunice couldn't help but whistle at the girl's witty performance. She took off her hood and clapped her hands. "Wow, keen insight. It seems that you really do have a lot of potential." "Oomph, I'm the teacher's chief apprentice. Of course I'm powerful." After saying that, the little girl raised her chin and put on a proud look, which immediately caused the other three to laugh kindly. Andre gently touched the girl's long blonde hair and said to the half-demon without looking back, "I have something to do. You're responsible for protecting them on the way back. If there's an accident on the way, don't hesitate to kill them all." "Kill them all?" Eunice raised her eyebrows. "Wow, that's not an order coming out of your mouth." "I can't help it. The city may be a bit chaotic recently. I'm worried that someone will take advantage of the situation. You know, the more uncertain the situation, the more people like to take risks. Although these guys can't do much, we still need to be cautious. I don't want to see any accidents happen. All right, I'll leave this to you. I'm in a hurry." With that, Andre pulled up his hood to cover his unusual hair and pupils. He walked straight through the hall and quickly pushed open the door, disappearing into the noisy streets. After more than a month of not seeing each other, the atmosphere in Linton City had become more solemn than before. Although business in the market was still flourishing, both merchants and ordinary citizens were very nervous. People could be heard everywhere talking about the upcoming meeting and the possible outbreak of a trade war. After all, the sea trade was the pillar of the city, and it concerned everyone's interests. Moreover, the instigator of the conflict was their archenemy, Bakarov City. The two sides had fought many trade wars, and the accumulated hatred was so deep that it was impossible to resolve. Many young people were shouting to attack the city and completely destroy all the shipyards, making those reckless fellows Linton City's vassals. Of course, this was only the hot-bloodedness of young people. The older people knew that Bakarov City was no pushover. Not only did they have the second largest fleet after Linton City, they also had an aerial force riding on griffins. Although there were only a dozen of them, the threat was not small at all. Griffins had the body and claws of a lion, the head and wings of an eagle. They were a brave and fearless creature, not even afraid of the dragons at the top of the world's food chain. Many countries saw them as a symbol of courage, and they were very powerful, large magical beasts. When they reached adulthood, they were no less powerful than feudal knights. Coupled with the fact that they could fly freely in the air, they were even more difficult to deal with than professionals above level 10. Chapter 288. It was precisely because of their existence that Linton City had won the trade war many times, but they were unable to completely eradicate the threat. They were forced to watch their opponents recover their strength time and time again before launching another challenge. It was a vicious cycle. Andre strolled along the streets as he silently gathered information. Unknowingly, he had arrived near the back street of the slums. Just as he was feeling somewhat stunned, he suddenly realized that the place had changed completely compared to a month ago. The originally stinky river had been cleaned up, and the dilapidated wooden houses on both sides of the street had been transformed into all sorts of service centers and shops. The hooligans had changed into uniforms and were constantly patrolling the area. The scantily clad prostitutes on the streets had also disappeared, replaced by a large number of enticing billboards. The number of passers-by gradually increased as well. Occasionally, there would even be a few carriages with the insignia of nobles passing by. Everything looked no different from the other streets. A newcomer would never have imagined that this was once the most chaotic, darkest, and lawless backstreet. Clearly, Black Lily Bonnie had already carried out a large-scale renovation of this area, according to the plan that they had discussed beforehand. Even the thieves that used to roam the streets and alleys had disappeared without a trace. Looking at the current state of the entire street, Andre took a deep breath and muttered to himself with a sigh, "Humans are really creatures with unlimited potential. To be able to complete such a huge workload in such a short period of time. Perhaps it won't be long before this place becomes the most prosperous place in the city." Just as he finished his sentence, he suddenly realized that there were 7 or 8 children in patched clothes squatting in an alley not far away. Each of them held a tray in their hands. On the tray was a fried fish, a large spoon of mashed potatoes, a few pieces of fatty and greasy meat slices of an unknown name, a large piece of black bread, and a small pile of vegetables. They were stuffing the food into their mouths as though there was no one around. Even though the food was very crude and simple, the portions were sufficient. All of them looked as though they had eaten the most delicious food in the world. All of them had satisfied expressions on their faces. Among them, there was a skinny boy who looked especially familiar, as though he had seen him somewhere before. After a brief recollection, Andre quickly recalled that the boy was the one who had tipped him off previously. His name should be Benson. At the same time, the boy seemed to recognize him. He hurriedly swallowed the food in his mouth and stood up in surprise. "Ah, Sir Mage, is it you? Oh, you can recognize me." Andre's face was filled with disbelief. He was now wearing a hood, and his entire face was hidden. The sapphire badge on his chest had been replaced with a pearl and ruby badge. There were no obvious markings on his body at all. How could he be recognized like this? Was there any justice in this world? Benson grinned and explained, "Of course I can. First of all, the robe you're wearing will reflect a little under the sunlight. Perhaps ordinary people won't notice it, but a veteran like me who's mingled in the streets and alleys can see at a glance. Secondly, the smell on your body is different from others. You don't have the strong, perfumed smell of nobles, nor do you have the sour smell of ordinary people. Lastly, there's the habit of walking. When you walk, there's almost no deviation in the distance of every step. I've been training as a thief recently, so I know what that means. Fine observation skills, sharp sense of smell, excellent memory. It looks like you're not simple at all. To be able to analyze so much information in just a few seconds," Andre praised with a smile. He never expected that a mere pickpocket who lived at the lowest rung of society would have such outstanding qualities. He was practically a natural at gathering information. The chess piece he had set up back then was finally showing its effects. Benson scratched his head in embarrassment. "You flatter me, Mr. Mage. I'm just a little bit better than ordinary thieves. I know who's putting on airs and who I can't afford to offend. Otherwise, boss wouldn't have promoted me to be the leader of all the thieves. Haha, being able to read people is also a talent. Besides, I think you still have a lot of room for improvement. Otherwise, Bonnie might have let you participate in the thief training. Do you have time? Bring me around. I want to understand the current situation in the back streets." With that said, Andre turned around and glanced at the somewhat familiar, yet unfamiliar street. "No problem. It's my honor to be of service to you." Benson hurriedly bowed and distributed the unfinished food on his plate to the other children. He then jogged over. Andre noticed that the young pickpockets didn't mind the ugly leftovers at all. In the blink of an eye, the leftovers were clean. Clearly, just from his point alone, it could be seen that their living conditions were terrible. Perhaps they didn't even have enough to eat and could only struggle to survive in poverty and hunger. Of course, they weren't much better now, but at least their tattered clothes were enough to cover their bodies. Although lunch was still simple and crude, it was definitely enough to fill their stomachs. Other than the fact that they still didn't have a pair of shoes on their feet, everyone looked rather healthy. It had to be said that this was a huge improvement. After all, more than a month ago, the living conditions of the residents in the back streets were like hell. But now it was a completely different scene. It was probably due to the integration of the gangs that the violence on the streets had decreased significantly. After all, the hooligans might not be afraid of being imprisoned by the patrolling soldiers, but they were definitely afraid of the rules set by the gangs. This was because the former would at most be beaten up and locked up for a few days without any consequences. The latter, on the other hand, would result in broken limbs or drowning in the sea. It might even implicate one's family and friends. Therefore, one had to think twice before acting. As they walked down the street aimlessly, Benson pointed at the buildings on both sides of the street and introduced, "Look, these are newly opened taverns. On the surface, they sell low-quality alcohol, but in secret, they are places where smugglers conduct their transactions. We provide them with a secret warehouse in the sewers, and they give us 15% of the profits every time a transaction is successful. The two-story building over there is a prostitution business. The boss of Black Lily gathered all the prostitutes on the streets and made them dress up as noble ladies, female pirates, female knights, priestesses, princesses, and queens. Many rich nobles and merchants like to come here for excitement. It's said that they can earn 1 to 200 gold coins a day. As for Gil Abel's old lair, it has been transformed into a large entertainment venue. The basement level is a casino and a coliseum. The ground level is a bar and a place for performances. Half of the second floor is a restaurant, and the other half is guest rooms. The coliseum is always packed with people. Just the entrance fee alone is a huge sum of money. Not to mention, there's also a cut for betting. Chapter 289. As he listened to the boys' incessant description of the gray area, Andre suddenly had a strange feeling. This was because he was the one who had single-handedly promoted the development of the gang. They had gone from the most primitive state where they couldn't even feed themselves to a modern model that integrated entertainment, smuggling, real estate, and many other aspects. One had to know that if there was no external interference, these fellows who had no knowledge and no skills, and only knew how to rob, steal, and exploit the poor all day long would not be able to learn how to make a fortune through running a guild without hundreds of years of practice. But looking at the current situation in Backstreet, all the gangsters in the slums clearly understood the benefits of establishing order and maintaining stability in their territory. Furthermore, with the diversified business model, it spurred a series of industrial chains, including taverns, casinos, special services, smuggling, renting warehouses, bloody gladiators, hotels, collecting protection fees, and so on. Even the nearby bakeries, small restaurants, and grocery stores had good business. Benson, do you think it's good or bad that Backstreet has become like this? Andre narrowed his eyes and asked softly. In fact, he didn't know if he had done a good thing or opened Pandora's box. From an economic point of view, the changes in Backstreet had attracted a large number of wealthy people to spend money, and it had greatly stimulated domestic demand, revitalizing the half-dead shops in the slums. But at the same time, this prosperity was nourished by Linton City. The more it developed, the weaker the city would become. Finally, after the gang's influence infiltrated every aspect, it would devour the entire city like a monster, turning it into a city of sin in comics or movies. I think it's great this way. I don't even have to risk being beaten to death to steal money from others. I can make a living just by asking around. I still can't believe it's real, the boy replied excitedly. Without a doubt, with his knowledge and intelligence, he could only sense the changes around him, but not the danger. Andre knew that he had asked the wrong person. He shrugged with a helpless smile and said, "All right, I hope you won't hate me in the future. Now bring me to Bonnie. I have something to discuss with her." Benson clearly didn't understand what he meant. He scratched the back of his head with a baffled look and said, "Of course, Mr. Mage. Boss should be in the Colosseum at this time. Recently, many foreign adventurers like to go there to make a name for themselves and earn money. Business is booming. Please follow me. Lead the way then. I'm also looking to see if there are any targets worth recruiting." With that, Andre pulled his hood tighter and walked straight to the tallest building in the entire backstreet. There were many sources of adventurers. There were the descendants of nobles who did not have the right of inheritance, as well as the commoners who were rich. As for those who did not even have armor and weapons, there were also many descendants of farmers who ran out with wooden sticks or pitchforks to risk their lives. However, the last type didn't even have basic equipment. Similarly, they hadn't undergone any systematic training. They were cannon fodder among cannon fodder, dying a tragic death in the wastelands within a month or two. Only the lucky ones with outstanding talent would be able to survive the initial hurdles and slowly accumulate rewards. They would then be equipped with a full set of weapons and armor, transforming into true veterans. In fact, anyone who could survive in the adventurer industry for more than 2 years might not have much savings, but they were definitely not poor. After all, even the most ordinary leather armor would cost about 30 Alliance gold coins. Metal armor would cost about 200 to 1,000 gold coins. Long swords, shields, bows, tents, sleeping bags, torches, and boots that had a high rate of wear and tear. In short, to survive in the dangerous wilderness, not only did they need to learn all kinds of knowledge, they also needed to spend a lot of money on equipment. Therefore, many people who had a skill often desired to break away from this state after being an adventurer for a period of time. Therefore, they would perform similar duels in public places, taking the opportunity to raise their reputation and attract the attention of the ruling class. Obviously, the newly opened Colosseum in the backstreet was a good opportunity to raise one's reputation. There was nothing better than a clash of iron and blood in public to show one's combat ability. Andre was in need of manpower to expand his forces. Recruiting a few adventurers who had strength but no background was undoubtedly the best choice. Gil Abel's lair was the only brick building in the entire backstreet. It was 3 stories high and took up a large area. In order to protect himself, he had specially built a high wall around it. Now, Blackley Bonnie had taken advantage of all this. After a series of modifications and renovations, the place no longer looked eerie and terrifying. It now looked like a luxurious hotel. The lawn and flower beds were taken care of by a regular gardener, and the roof and walls were planted with vines. More than 10 burly men in armor and weapons stood guard nearby. 2 scantily clad women stood at the door to welcome every guest who came in. As the 2 approached the entrance, a middle-aged man with a full beard and a terrifying scar on his face stepped forward and looked at Andre warily. At the same time, he lowered his voice and asked the boy, "Benson, what's going on? Who's that behind you?" "It's nothing, Scarface. This gentleman behind me is the boss's closest friend." "Friend?" The man called Scarface frowned slightly. "Are you sure there's no threat?" "Of course not. Damn it. I really don't know where you get your vigilance from. Every time I bring someone here, I have to be interrogated by you," Benson complained bitterly. Scarface shrugged with a smile. "I can't help it. My job is to protect the boss and the building behind him, so you have to understand that these interrogations are necessary. Also, I'm very sorry, sir. I hope you won't speak ill of me in front of the boss." Andre looked at the man's vigilant eyes and smiled slightly. He nodded approvingly. "Please don't worry. I understand your job very well, and at the same time, I agree with your serious attitude. I have to say that you are the most suitable person for protection I've ever seen. Eliminating danger in the bud is always the best choice." "Ha! Thank you very much. I used to be a scout in the army, so I can feel that those people are more dangerous. But since a few months ago, my leg was injured and I couldn't continue to run in the wild. Fortunately, the boss here gave me a job. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have to sleep on the streets with my family. After that, the scarred man slightly bent down and made a gesture of invitation. He had already noticed the badge on Andre's chest and instantly understood that the mysterious hooded man in front of him was a mage with terrifying supernatural powers. It was impossible for such a person to be an assassin. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been discovered by anyone. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.